The spell tore reality like wet paper. One moment, Kal-El had the magic user's throat in his grip. Another of Zatanna's desperate apprentices trying to undermine the regime's perfect order. The next backward-spoken words became a scream of raw power that didn't banish him or bind him, but ripped the fabric of existence itself. The Fortress of Solitude's crystalline walls shattered into prismatic fragments as dimensional boundaries collapsed. Superman felt the pull of somewhere else, somewhere wrong, dragging him through a wound in space that sealed shut behind him like scar tissue. No Phantom Zone cold, no Speed Force electricity, just the nauseating lurch of falling between universes. He crashed through a billboard, some advertisement for energy drinks, and plowed a trench through asphalt before his Kryptonian physiology arrested the momentum. Clark rose from the crater in downtown New York, dust settling around his red boots, cape billowing in wind that smelled of exhaust and something else, something rotten beneath the urban perfume. The city looked right, skyscrapers of glass and steel, yellow cabs honking, pedestrians with phones raised to record his arrival. New York, or something very much like it. But Clark's super hearing picked up the wrongness immediately, heartbeats pumping with chemical irregularities, conversations saturated with casual cruelty, and somewhere close, someone was screaming. He turned toward the sound, X-ray vision penetrating concrete and rebar. A parking garage 3 blocks north. Multiple heat signatures, and one signature blazing with energy that registered as vaguely familiar. Another powered individual, someone strong, and they were... Clark's jaw clenched. Heat vision flickered red at the corners of his eyes. The powered individual was holding someone by the throat, 30 feet above the parking garage floor. A civilian, a woman judging by the thermal outline, thrashing and pleading, and the powered individual was smiling. Superman moved, not flight, a leap that carried him 3 blocks in a single bound. Concrete splintering under the force of his departure. He crashed through the parking garage's upper level, rebar and concrete parting like tissue paper, and landed between the victim and the ground just as the powered individual let go. Clark caught her gently, super speed, making the action effortless. She was young, maybe mid-20s, hyperventilating against his chest. "You're safe," he said quietly, the words automatic after years of rescues. Even after Lois, even after the regime. Some things remained. He set her down carefully and looked up at the figure floating in the parking garage's fluorescent lighting. The man wore a costume, bright primary colors, American flag motif, cape. Everything about the visual presentation screamed hero. But Clark's senses told a different story. Elevated heart rate consistent with arousal, not distress. Pupils dilated with excitement, not fear. And the scent, cologne masking something chemical, something artificial in his very biology. "Well, well," the cape man said, voice dripping with theatrical charm that didn't quite mask an underlying edge. "New soupy in town?" Vought didn't send a memo. He drifted lower, boots touching down on the garage's oil-stained concrete. "Love the classic look, very retro. I'm Homelander, leader of the Seven. You've probably heard of me." Clark's X-ray vision swept the man's body. No skeletal structure abnormalities, but something was wrong with the cellular composition. Uniform chemical saturation throughout the tissues, like his powers came from external enhancement rather than natural biology. Not Kryptonian, not Martian, not any form of meta-human Clark recognized. "Let her go," Clark said quietly, nodding toward the woman who was backing away slowly, terrified eyes darting between the 2 men in capes. Homelander's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind his blue eyes. "She's free to go. Just having a little chat about respecting her betters." He turned that smile toward the woman. "Aren't you, sweetheart?" The woman ran. Her footsteps echoed through the parking garage, rapid and panicked. "So," Homelander said, attention back on Clark, "you crash into my city, wear the cape and boots, and what? Think you're gonna just play hero? This is Seven territory, Vought territory. You want in on the action? You talk to my people? You audition? You sign the contracts? That's how it works." Clark's super hearing expanded, sweeping the city block by block. More irregularities. In a building 6 blocks east, multiple chemical signatures surrounded what sounded like crying. 2 blocks south, someone with enhanced speed was taking something from a store while the owner begged. And everywhere, the heartbeats that pulsed with that same artificial chemical resonance. What happened to this world, Clark asked, the question more to himself than Homelander. Happened? Homelander's laugh was sharp, brittle. Nothing happened. This is the world, pal. Soups on top, mud people on the bottom, vote making sure everyone knows their place. You're clearly new, so I'll give you the orientation speech. You don't operate without 7 approval. You don't take endorsement deals without VOD approval. And you definitely don't show up in my city without... You were going to kill her, Clark interrupted. The woman. You were going to drop her. Homelander's expression shifted. Just slightly, just enough. The smile remained but gained teeth. Maybe, maybe not. Point is, it's my call. I'm Homelander. I'm the hero. I do what I want. In the Injustice timeline, Clark had killed the Joker. He'd felt the clown's neck snap in his hands and felt nothing but righteous fury. He'd built the regime because the world needed order, needed someone strong enough to end the chaos that had taken Lois, taken his unborn child, taken his future. But he'd never claimed to do whatever he wanted. You're not a hero, Clark said quietly. You're a thug in a costume. The parking garage lights flickered. Homelander's eyes began to glow, red, like heat vision. But the energy signature was wrong, weaker, more unstable. You want to say that again? Clark's own eyes ignited, and the red glow that emanated from them made Homelander's attempt look like a child's nightlight. You heard me. For exactly 3 seconds, they stood there. 2 figures in capes with eyes burning crimson, the air between them shimmering with potential violence. Then Homelander's tactical mind apparently processed the energy differential in those twin glares, and he dialed his heat vision back with a forced laugh. Okay. Strong energy signature, very impressive. Look, we got off on the wrong foot. How about we start over? Homelander extended a hand, smile returning to the practiced, marketable version. Homelander, the Homelander, leader of the 7, America's favorite superhero. And you are? Clark didn't take the hand. Superman. Superman, Homelander repeated, testing the word. Cute. Very on brand. You got representation? Agent? Manager? Because whoever designed your look, they nailed it. Very aspirational. Volt's gonna eat this up. We could probably work out a deal. Get you on the team. Maybe as like my protege or... I'm not interested in your team, Clark said. I'm interested in why you were about to murder a civilian. Homelander's jaw tightened. She was talking shit on Twitter. About me. Do you know what I am? Do you understand what I've done for this country? I've saved thousands of lives. Tens of thousands. I'm a goddamn American hero. And some nobody with a keyboard thinks she can just... Clark's super hearing caught it. 12 blocks west, a soup with enhanced strength had just punched through a wall. Screaming. Children screaming. He was moving before Homelander finished his sentence. Sonic boom cracking across the city as Superman accelerated to Mach 3 in under a second. The parking garage windows shattered from the pressure wave. Behind him, he heard Homelander shout something. But Clark was already gone, crossing 12 city blocks in the time it took a human heart to beat twice. He crashed through the apartment wall, controlled crash, angled to avoid the children huddled in the corner, and seized the soup by the back of his neck. The man wore a black tactical suit, muscles chemically enhanced to absurd proportions, and he'd been in the process of threatening a family. Outside, Clark growled, and launched them both through the wall and into the open air. They tumbled through sky, the soup struggling uselessly against Kryptonian strength. Clark arrested their fall 100 feet above the street, holding the man by his tactical vest while pedestrians below pointed and filmed. "What's your name?" Clark demanded. The soup's eyes were wild, veins standing out on his neck. "Groundhawk, I'm Groundhawk. I'm with the VOT Urban Defense Initiative. I was on a sanction. You were terrorizing children. I was motivating compliance. The dad hadn't paid his protection fees, so I was demonstrating consequences. It's protocol. It's..." Clark felt something break inside him. Not break open, It had already been broken since Metropolis burned, but break further, fracturing into sharper edges. This world had no Justice League, no Batman to whisper caution, no Wonder Woman to embody principled violence, no Flash to represent hope despite tragedy. Just this: corporate thugs in capes preying on the weak while calling it heroism. The regime had been necessary on his Earth to stop the chaos that let the Joker operate. Here, the chaos wasn't being stopped. It was being monetized. "Protocol," Clark repeated flatly. Then he looked Groundhog in the eyes and said, "New protocol. You don't hurt people, ever, or I come back." He released the soup from 50 feet up, high enough to terrify, low enough that the chemical enhancements would handle the landing. Groundhog hit a parked car with a crash of buckling metal and alarm systems, then scrambled away, fear finally overriding the artificial bravado. Clark descended slowly to street level. The crowd had grown, dozens of people with phones, recording, muttering, backing away. Not with hope, with fear. They looked at him the way people looked at the regime's soldiers. Because in this world, everyone in a cape was a monster. A teenage boy in a faded hoodie stood at the front of the crowd, phone raised, but his eyes weren't frightened. They were calculating. "Who are you?" he called out. "Superman," Clark said simply. "You with Vought?" "No." "You gonna hurt people?" Clark looked at the crowd, at the fear, the cynicism, the learned helplessness in every face. He thought of the regime, of the world he'd created through absolute control. He thought of Lois's heartbeat, stopped forever. He thought of the Joker's neck snapping. He thought of every choice that had led him from hero to tyrant. And he realized with cold certainty that in this broken world, those choices might actually have been right. "I'm going to help," he said quietly, "whether you want me to or not. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below. Hope shines brightest in the darkest night." He rose into the air, cape catching the wind, and his super hearing swept the city for the next scream, the next crime, the next soupy treating humans like toys. Behind him, the crowd's murmuring rose in volume, and across the city, in a tower made of glass and corporate ambition, someone was already making phone calls about the new player who just declared war on their business model. Clark Kent, the Man of Steel, the architect of the regime, floated above a city that needed saving from its own heroes. And for the first time since Lois died, he felt something like purpose. The Vought Tower boardroom occupied the 78th floor, all reinforced glass and chrome furniture designed to project power through minimalism. Madeline Stillwell stood at the head of the conference table, her tablet displaying a dozen different phone recordings of the parking garage confrontation, each angle showing the same thing: Homelander backing down. That had never happened before. "Play it again," she said, voice tight with controlled tension. The marketing analyst, some 25-year-old with an MBA and no survival instincts, tapped the screen. The footage replayed, Homelander's heat vision flickering out while the stranger's eyes burned like twin suns. The body language was unmistakable. Homelander had blinked first. "We're calling him Superman," the analyst offered. "Social media's already running with it. The costume, the powers, the whole aesthetic. Very retro, very American. Focus groups are responding positively to the—" "I don't care about focus groups," Stillwell interrupted. "I care about control. We have no contract, no file, no leverage. He's operating in our city, confronting our heroes, and we don't even know where he came from." She turned to the man sitting at the far end of the table. "Stan, thoughts?" Stan Edgar, CEO of Vought International, hadn't looked up from his own tablet throughout the entire meeting. Now he set it down with deliberate care, fingers steepled in front of him. "We're asking the wrong questions, not where he came from. That's irrelevant. The question is what he wants." "He wants to play hero," Stillwell said. "Classic savior complex. He stopped Groundhog's collection run, gave some speech about helping people. Standard, self-righteous, vigilante profile." "No." Edgar's voice carried the weight of decades building corporate empire on the backs of chemically enhanced weapons. "Groundhog is currently in the medical wing with 3 cracked ribs and a shattered pelvis. The impact velocity suggests Superman dropped him from approximately 50 feet. That's not restraint. That's measured violence, calculated to injure and terrify, not kill, but certainly not the action of someone with a classic savior complex. The boardroom door opened. Homelander walked in, costume still pristine despite the earlier confrontation, smile fixed in place like a mannequin's. But Stillwell had managed Homelander for 6 years. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his right hand kept clenching and unclenching. "John," she said, using his real name, the one reserved for private moments in damage control. "Sit down. Tell us what happened." Homelander didn't sit. He stood at the window, looking out over the city, hands clasped behind his back in a pose he'd probably seen in some war movie. "He's strong, stronger than me. I could feel it when our heat vision—" He stopped, jaw working. "I could feel the difference." The room went very quiet. "How much stronger?" Edgar asked, tone unchanged, as if he were asking about quarterly projections. "I don't know. A lot. Maybe." Homelander's reflection in the glass showed something rare: uncertainty. He broke the sound barrier, just taking off. No running start, no strain. Just gone. "I've never moved that fast." Stillwell pulled up another video on the main screen. Superman's intercept of Groundhog. Frame-by-frame analysis showed him crossing 12 city blocks in 2.3 seconds. The sonic boom had shattered windows in a 3-block radius. "Compound V enhancement peaks at certain thresholds," Edgar observed. "We've never seen anyone exceed Homelander's benchmarks by more than 15%. This isn't 15%. This is exponential difference." He looked at Homelander. "Did he say anything about his enhancement? Mention Compound V? Any other companies? Any competitor products?" "He didn't mention anything," Homelander said. "He just looked at me like I was—" The smile finally cracked. "Like I was nothing. Like I was some cheap knockoff." "You're not," Stillwell said automatically. The reassurance delivered with the smooth practice of years managing an unstable asset. "You're the Homelander. You're America's hero. This Superman is an unknown variable. Probably some foreign enhancement program. Maybe Russian, maybe Chinese. We'll figure out his origin, find his pressure points, and bring him into the fold or eliminate him. Standard protocol." "He knew," Homelander said quietly, "about the woman in the parking garage. He knew I was going to drop her, and he looked at me like I was evil, like I was the villain." He turned from the window, and now the smile was completely gone, replaced by something raw and wounded. "I've saved thousands of people, tens of thousands. I've stopped terrorists. I've prevented disasters. I'm the most beloved hero in American history, and he looks at me like I'm the Joker." The reference hung in the air. The Joker, the psychopathic killer who'd bombed downtown Cleveland before Homelander had lasered him in half on live television. Vaught's PR team had turned it into the greatest triumph in modern superhero history. Homelander ends evil. Approval ratings had spiked to 92%. "He doesn't understand the context," Stillwell said. "He doesn't know what you've accomplished, the lives you've saved, the difference you've made. Once he understands that Vought creates order, that we keep chaos at bay—" "I don't think he cares about order," Homelander interrupted. "I think he cares about being better than me." Edgar stood, smoothing his suit jacket. "Then we give him what he wants, make him an offer. Full 7 membership, primetime coverage, merchandising rights. Every soup has a price, John, even ones who pretend they don't." He looked at Stillwell. "Set up a meeting, Vought Tower tomorrow morning. Make it public. Cameras, press, the full show. We're welcoming Superman to the family." "And if he refuses?" Stillwell asked. "Then we demonstrate why Vought owns the superhero industry," Edgar said simply. "The Deep, A-Train, Queen Maeve, Black Noir, all available for deployment. Homelander provides aerial superiority. 5 against 1. Live on camera, framed as training exercise gone wrong. The narrative becomes Rogue Soup attacks 7. 7 responds with necessary force." He checked his watch. "I have a call with the Pentagon in 10 minutes. Handle this." He left. Stillwell turned back to Homelander, who was staring at the frozen image of Superman on the screen. Cape billowing, eyes blazing red. every inch the iconic hero that Homelander had been designed to mimic. "We should kill him," Homelander said quietly, "before he becomes a problem, before people start comparing us, before they realize you're not unique," Stillwell finished. She walked over, placed a hand on his arm. "John, you are unique. You're the Homelander. You're perfect. This Superman is just another soup, and every soup has weaknesses. We'll find his and we'll use them. But first, we tried diplomacy. Vought doesn't survive by killing everyone who threatens market share. We survive by controlling the narrative." Homelander nodded slowly, smile creeping back into place like muscle memory. "Okay, yeah, diplomacy first. But Madeline?" "Yes? When diplomacy fails, and it will fail, because he looked at me like I was nothing, I want to be there when we put him down." "Of course," Stillwell said, and meant it. Across the city in a basement beneath a pawn shop in Brooklyn, Billy Butcher watched the same footage on a laptop held together with duct tape in spite. "Fucking hell," he muttered, accent thick with South London gravel. "Another cape. Just what we needed." Huey Campbell stood behind him, still processing what they were seeing. "But he stopped Groundhog. He protected that family. That's good, right? That's actually heroic." "There's no such thing as a heroic soup," Butcher said flatly. "They're all the same. Compound V in their veins, God complex in their heads, and sooner or later, they all show their true colors. This Superman cunt is just better at the PR game than most." Frenchie sat at the workbench, cleaning a rifle with methodical precision. The sonic boom, it shattered reinforced glass in 3-block radius. The energy output required for such speed. He whistled appreciatively. "This is not normal enhancement. Even Homelander cannot move this fast." "Which makes him more dangerous," Butcher said. "Stronger means harder to kill. Faster means harder to ambush. And if Vought gets their hooks in him..." "They won't," a voice said from the doorway. Mother's Milk stood there, tablet in hand, frown creasing his features. "I've been running pattern analysis on his movements. Look." He pulled up a map of New York, pins marking Superman's interventions over the past 4 hours. "He's not following Vought protocols. Vought soups stay in their designated zones, handle pre-approved incidents, make sure the cameras get good angles. This guy's responding to actual crimes. No cameras, no coverage, just intervention." "Could be establishing brand identity," Butcher countered. "Get the grassroots support before Vought makes the big announcement." "Or," Huey said quietly, "he could actually be trying to help." Butcher turned on him with the kind of look that had preceded violence in the past. "Your girlfriend got killed by A-Train. You saw what these cunts are really like. They don't help. They perform. They market. They monetize. And when the cameras are off, they rape and murder and laugh about it because nobody can stop them." "I know," Huey said, but he pointed at the screen showing Superman holding the terrified woman gently, setting her down with obvious care. "But look at his face. That's not performance. That's genuine. Genuine psychopathy," Butcher said. "Frenchie, how fast can you cook up something to neutralize him? Modified explosive, maybe adapted from the A-Train countermeasures? For someone who moves faster than sound? Mon ami, I would need time and resources and probably divine intervention." Frenchie set down the rifle. "Besides, we do not yet know if he is enemy. Perhaps we watch first, we?" The basement door opened again. Kimiko descended the stairs, silent as always, but her eyes were bright with something that might have been excitement. She pulled out her phone, showed them another video, this one from a bodega security camera. Superman had stopped a mugging, disarmed the mugger without hurting him, given the victim money from his own pocket for the stolen items, and flown away before anyone could thank him. "He paid for it himself," MM observed. "Vought soups don't carry cash. They expense everything." Butcher stared at the footage, jaw working. "Finally, we make contact, feel him out, see if he's really the Boy Scout he's pretending to be, or if he's just another monster in a cape." "And if he's actually a Boy Scout?" Huey asked. Butcher's smile was sharp and joyless. "Then we use him to kill every other soup in the city, starting with Homelander. And when he's done being useful," the smile widened, "we put him down too." In an abandoned warehouse in Queens, Superman floated cross-legged 3 feet above the concrete floor, eyes closed, super hearing sweeping the city in expanding circles. He'd been doing this for 2 hours now, listening, learning, understanding. The world he'd landed in was worse than he'd imagined. In his universe, the Injustice timeline, he'd established the regime because the Joker had proven that chaos, left unchecked, would destroy everything beautiful. Lois, his child, Metropolis. The regime wasn't tyranny, it was necessary order imposed by someone strong enough to enforce it. But here, in this world, the enhanced individuals weren't fighting chaos, they were perpetuating it, profiting from it, embodying it. He listened to Homelander participate in a conference call about brand management while ignoring a fire 3 blocks away. He'd heard A-Train laugh about crippling someone who'd insulted him online. He'd tracked Black Noir stalking a woman who'd filed a complaint against Vought. He'd identified at least 47 soups operating in New York alone, and only one, a blonde woman called Starlight, showed even baseline human decency. The rest were predators wearing hero costumes. Clark opened his eyes, red boots touching down on concrete. His cape settled around his shoulders, and he looked at his reflection in a grimy warehouse window. The S-shield still gleamed despite the dimensional journey. The costume Lois had helped design, back when he'd been Earth's greatest hero instead of its absolute ruler. What would she think of him now? Of the regime, of the choices he'd made, of the blood on his hands? What would she think of this world? The answer came immediately. She would want him to help, not to rule, not to control, but to genuinely help the people being crushed under corporate, superpowered boots. But Clark wasn't the hero he'd been before Metropolis burned. He was the man who'd killed the Joker with his bare hands, the man who'd imprisoned or executed anyone who opposed the regime, the man who'd looked Bruce Wayne in the eyes and said, "I'm doing this with or without you." He couldn't be the pure symbol of hope anymore. That man had died with Lois. But maybe in a world this broken, he could be something else. Something necessary. His super hearing caught it. A scream, 8 blocks north. Chemical signature moving at enhanced speed toward the sound. Another soup about to hurt someone. Superman rose into the air, cape billowing. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere in Vought Tower, they were planning how to control him or destroy him. Somewhere in a basement, vigilantes were debating whether he was ally or enemy. And somewhere in his own mind, Kal-El of Krypton was calculating exactly how much force would be required to break this world's corruption. He accelerated toward the scream, sonic boom cracking across the cityscape. Behind him, the sun dipped below the horizon, and New York prepared for whatever came next. The boys made contact at 2:47 a.m. Clark was intervening in his 19th incident of the night, a soup called Shockwave using electrical powers to extort a restaurant owner, when he heard the pattern. 3 heartbeats, elevated but controlled, positioned on rooftops forming a triangle around his location. Military positioning, tactical observation. He'd been expecting this. Every intervention tonight had been recorded, analyzed. Someone would eventually decide to either recruit or eliminate him. Clark deposited Shockwave unconscious in front of a police station, along with video evidence of the extortion recorded on the soup's own phone. The officers inside stared through the glass doors, making no move to come outside. Their heartbeats spiked with fear, not of Shockwave, but of Superman. In this world, the police were terrified of everyone with powers. He rose into the night air and flew directly toward the nearest heartbeat. No pretense, no stealth. If they wanted to talk, they could do it openly. The rooftop belonged to a man in his late 40s. Dark coat, graying beard, and eyes that held the kind of hatred that came from personal loss. Yes, he didn't flinch when Superman landed 10 feet away, which marked him as either very brave or very suicidal. "Billy Butcher," the man said, accent placing him somewhere in South London. "You and me need to have a chat." "I'm listening," Clark said. "You've made quite the splash tonight. 19 interventions in 6 hours, groundhogs in hospital, Shockwave's in custody. Well, custody until Vaught's lawyers spring him in about 3 hours. You've pissed off every soup in Manhattan and made Vaught's stock price drop 0.5%. Butcher pulled out a cigarette. lit it with casual disregard for the flying godman standing nearby. Question is, are you stupid or do you have a death wish? Neither, Clark said. I'm establishing parameters. Parameters? Butcher laughed, sharp and joyless. That's a fancy way of saying you're picking fights with psychopaths who can level buildings. Let me educate you on how this works, mate. Vought owns the soups. Soups own the streets. And anybody who challenges that arrangement ends up disappeared. You might be strong. Christ, you might be stronger than Homelander. But you're one bloke against a multinational corporation with unlimited resources and zero ethics. Clark's X-ray vision had already cataloged the weapons Butcher carried. 2 handguns, combat knife, what looked like a modified grenade. All useless against Kryptonian physiology, but Butcher couldn't know that. You're not here to warn me, Clark observed. You're here to recruit me. Butcher's smile gained an edge. Smart and strong. Dangerous combination. Yeah, I want to recruit you. My team, the boys, we kill soups. The bad ones, the rapists, the murderers, the corporate psychos in capes who think they're gods. We've taken down 13 so far, but we're human, which means we're limited. You though? He gestured at Superman with his cigarette. You could walk into Vought Tower and end this whole fucked up system in about 10 minutes. By killing them, Clark said. It wasn't a question. By doing what's necessary, Homelander's killed 347 civilians that we can document. A-Train crippled a woman in front of her boyfriend because he was in too much of a hurry to go around. Black Noir is a literal serial killer. These aren't heroes, mate. They're weapons that Vought markets as heroes. And the only language weapons understand is superior force. Clark had heard this argument before. On his own Earth from his own lips, standing over the Joker's corpse while Batman raged at him about lines that shouldn't be crossed. I've killed before, Clark admitted. I know what it costs. Butcher's eyebrows rose slightly. So you're not some naive idealist in a cape. Good. That means you understand reality. These cunts need to die, and you're the only one strong enough to do it without dying yourself. And after I kill them? Clark asked. After Homelander, A-Train, all of Vought's soups are dead. What then? Who decides which powered individuals deserve execution? Who determines the threshold of acceptable collateral damage? We do, Butcher said simply. My team. We're not soups. We don't have conflicts of interest. Clark's super hearing picked up the other heartbeats converging, the rest of Butcher's team approaching from different rooftops. A young man with anxious energy, an older black man with steady, military-precise breathing, a French accent muttering calculations, and one heartbeat that was wrong, artificial, chemical-enhanced but not like the soups he'd encountered. Female, silent movement. Your team includes an enhanced individual, Clark said. The woman, 4th rooftop, eastern approach. Chemical signature similar to Compound V soups. Butcher's jaw tightened. Kimiko's different. She didn't choose enhancement. She's a victim who fights back. But she has powers. By your own logic, shouldn't she be eliminated? It's not about having powers, Butcher snapped. It's about what you do with them. Kimiko uses hers to protect people, to kill the monsters who hurt the innocent. That makes her human in my book. And if I disagree, Clark asked quietly, if I decide that your team's methods cross lines I won't accept, what then? The rooftop went very still. Butcher's hand didn't move toward his weapons. He wasn't quite that stupid, but Clark could hear his heart rate spike, fight-or-flight response activating. Then I suppose we have a problem, Butcher said carefully. The other heartbeats arrived. 4 figures emerged from the darkness. The young man Butcher had called Huey, the tactical older man, a Frenchman with clever eyes, and the woman. She was Asian, petite, and her eyes reflected light like an animal's. Her hands were stained with what Clark's enhanced sight identified as blood, and old scars covered her arms. This is my crew, Butcher said. Frenchie, Huey, and Kimiko. We're the only people in this city actively fighting Vought's control. And we're offering you a chance to actually make a difference instead of playing whack-a-mole with street-level soup crime. I appreciate the offer, Clark said, but I'm not interested in joining a kill squad. Then what are you interested in? Asked, voice deep and measured. Because from where we're standing, you're picking fights you can't win long-term. Vought will come at you with everything. Legal teams, propaganda, eventually their entire soup roster. You can't fight all of them alone. I've fought entire armies alone, Clark said quietly, thinking of the regime's conquest of his Earth. I've dismantled governments, neutralized metahuman resistance cells, imposed order on a planet that was tearing itself apart. I know how to win wars. The team exchanged glances. Huey stepped forward, nervous but determined. Then why aren't you winning this one? Why are you just stopping individual crimes instead of going after Vought directly? It was a good question, one Clark had been asking himself all night. The truth was complicated. On his Earth, he justified the regime because chaos needed to be controlled, because the Joker had proven that leaving power in the hands of the weak and corrupt led to tragedy. But here, the power was already consolidated, in Vought's hands and the soups they controlled, in a system that had convinced the world that corporate-sponsored violence was heroism. Dismantling that system would require becoming what he'd been on his Earth, an absolute authority who decided what was right through superior force. And Clark wasn't sure he could trust himself with that role anymore. Not after Lois. Not after seeing what the regime had cost. I'm gathering information, he said finally, understanding the system before I break it. While people die, Butcher said flatly, every night you waste gathering information. Soups are raping, murdering, destroying lives. Every moment you hesitate, Vought gets stronger. You want to understand the system? Here it is. Vought creates soups with compound V. They control those soups through contracts, blackmail, and psychological manipulation. They market those soups as heroes while using them as corporate enforcers. And anybody who threatens that arrangement, journalists, activists, whistleblowers, disappears. That's the system. Now break it. Clark looked at the 5 humans in front of him. They were outmatched, outpowered, operating with resources that wouldn't last a week against Vought's full attention. But they were fighting anyway, because someone had to. On his Earth, Batman had led the insurgency against the regime for the same reason. Because someone had to resist, even when resistance was futile. Clark had broken Batman's back for that resistance. I'm not going to kill for you, he said clearly, but I'm not your enemy either. If Vought comes after you, I'll intervene. If soups target civilians, I'll stop them. But I won't execute people based on your intelligence. Even Homelander? Huey asked quietly. You saw him tonight. You know what he is. If you have the power to stop him permanently, don't you have the responsibility to use it? The question struck deeper than the young man probably intended. Responsibility, power. The exact argument Clark had used to justify the regime. With great power comes great responsibility, Clark said, but also great danger. The danger that you'll convince yourself that your judgment is infallible, that your methods are justified, that the ends excuse any means. He looked at Butcher. You want me to kill Homelander, then A-Train, then every soup you deem unacceptable. And when I've killed them all, what's to stop me from deciding that humans who oppose me are also unacceptable? Your conscience, Butcher said. Conscience is a flexible thing, Clark replied, thinking of the Joker's neck snapping, especially when you're convinced you're saving the world. Frenchie spoke for the first time, accent thick. So you have killed before, and you fear becoming the monster again. This is why you hesitate. Clark met his eyes. Yes. Then let me ask you this, mon ami. If you do nothing, and Homelander kills again, as he will, are you not also responsible? The sin of inaction can be as grave as the sin of action. It was the exact argument Diana had made when Clark killed the Joker. The exact justification he'd used for every regime execution. I need time, Clark said, to understand this world, to see if there's a solution that doesn't require me to become its tyrant. There isn't, Butcher said flatly. I've been fighting this fight for 8 years. I've tried every angle, legal, PR, direct action. The only thing that works is killing them. And you're the first person I've met who's actually strong enough to do it and survive. Superman rose into the air, cape billowing. I'm sorry your world is this broken. I'm sorry you've lost so much that killing seems like the only answer. But I won't be your executioner. Not yet. Not yet, Butcher repeated. So there's still hope you'll see reason. There's hope I'll find another way, Clark corrected. Hope is what separates heroes from killers. He left them on the rooftop, accelerating into the night sky with a sonic boom that rattled windows across 3 blocks. Below, the boys watched him disappear into the darkness. He's going to get himself killed, MM said quietly. Or worse, Frenchie added, he will become what he fears, the tyrant. I have seen it before, in men with far less power. He'll come around, Butcher said, lighting another cigarette. They always do. This world doesn't allow heroes. It allows survivors and corpses. He'll figure out which one he wants to be. Huey stared at the sky where Superman had vanished. What if he's right? What if there is another way? Butcher turned on him with that sharp, joyless smile. Then he's smarter than me, stronger than Homelander, and still naive enough to believe in fairy tales. Which means he's dangerous in ways we can't even predict. He started walking toward the roof access door. Stay close to him, learn his patterns. And when he finally snaps, when he realizes that hope doesn't work in this world, make sure we're positioned to aim him at Vought before he aims at us. Kimiko signed something in ASL. Frenchie translated, she says he has kind eyes, like her brother before the world broke him. Yeah, Butcher said quietly. That's what worries me. In Vought Tower, Madeline Stillwell reviewed footage of Superman's meeting with the boys through telephoto lenses and directional microphones. The audio quality was poor. Something about Superman seemed to disrupt electronic surveillance at close range, but the body language was clear. He'd refused to join them, which meant he was either incredibly principled or playing a longer game. She pulled up the dossier her team had compiled over the past 6 hours. No records of a Superman in any government database. No compound Vi trial records matching his power signature. No satellite imagery showing his arrival point. He'd simply appeared, as if dropped from another dimension. The thought made her pause. Vought had explored dimensional technology briefly in the 90s, before the Belize facility incident. The research had been buried, classified beyond even her access level. But what if? Her phone buzzed. Stan Edgar. The meeting's confirmed. His voice came through, calm as always. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., Vought Tower main stage, full press coverage. We're framing this as Vought welcomes new hero to the family. Make sure Homelander looks welcoming, not threatened. And if Superman refuses the offer, then we demonstrate that Vought protects its brand, Edgar said. The 7 will engage him in what we'll call a training exercise. Full power. Homelander wants to prove his superiority. Let him prove it on camera. Either Superman joins us, or he becomes a cautionary tale about operating without Vought approval. 5 against 1 might look bad optically, Stillwell ventured. 5 against 1 looks like proper risk management, Edgar corrected. We're not in the business of fair fights. We're in the business of controlling the narrative. Get it done. He disconnected. Stillwell looked back at the frozen image of Superman on her screen, hovering above the city, cape billowing, the perfect icon of heroism that Homelander had been designed to embody. Tomorrow they would break him or own him. She began drafting the press release. The invitation arrived at dawn. Clark was perched on the Chrysler Building's Art Deco spire, watching the sun rise over New York, when a drone approached. Military-grade, silent rotors, painted in Vought's corporate blue and gold. It hovered 20 feet away, maintaining cautious distance, and projected a holographic message into the air. Madeline Stillwell's face materialized, professionally warm. Superman, on behalf of Vought International and the 7, I'm extending an invitation to meet with us this morning at 10 a.m. Vought Tower. We believe there's been a misunderstanding about our operations and would like to discuss how someone with your remarkable abilities might find a home with our organization. This is an opportunity for dialogue, not confrontation. We hope you'll accept. The hologram flickered off. The drone waited, presumably for a response. Clark's super hearing had already identified the snipers positioned on 3 surrounding buildings. Not that their rifles would do anything against Kryptonian biology, but the positioning revealed Vaught's mindset. They'd extended an invitation while preparing for conflict. He floated over to the drone, looked directly into its camera array. I'll be there. The drone's acknowledgement light blinked green and it rotated away, disappearing into morning traffic. Clark watched it go, then swept his vision across the city. Morning commuters flooding subway stations, coffee shops opening, normal human activity flowing around the gaps where Soups had brutalized people overnight. He'd stopped 16 incidents after leaving the boys. A Soup called Tech Knight attempting to assault a young woman, Popclaw using her enhanced strength to rob a jewelry store, Ezekiel using his extendable arms to steal from an ATM while preaching about Jesus. And in every case, the pattern was the same. The Soup showed no remorse, the victim showed no surprise, and the police showed no interest in actual justice. This world had normalized superpowered predation. Clark descended toward the street, landing in an alley beside a shuttered bodega. His costume drew immediate attention. People's heads swiveled, phones raised, but they kept walking, kept distance. No one approached, no one asked for help or autographs or expressed hope. They learned that capes meant danger. A television in a nearby electronics store showed morning news. The anchor was discussing Superman's vigilante activities with clear disapproval. 17 incidents of unauthorized superpowered intervention last night alone. Legal experts question whether this so-called Superman has proper insurance, training, or vote certification to operate as a hero. The 7 have expressed concern about unlicensed Soups creating liability issues. Clark's jaw tightened. In his world, the media had feared the regime but respected what it accomplished. Here, they were Vought's mouthpiece, framing actual heroism as a liability concern. "You're him!" The voice came from behind, female, young, genuine warmth instead of fear. Clark turned to find a blonde woman in civilian clothes, though his X-ray vision identified the Starlight costume folded in her bag. Annie January, the one Soup he'd identified as genuinely trying to help people. "I'm Superman," he said carefully. "I know. I've been watching your interventions." She moved closer, keeping her voice low despite the early morning street noise. "I wanted to say thank you for stopping Tech Knight, for protecting people, for actually doing what we're supposed to do." Clark studied her, heartbeat steady, no deception in her body language, but tension in her shoulders, dark circles under expertly applied makeup, and a fading bruise on her left wrist that suggested recent violence. "You're Starlight," he said, "one of the 7. Unfortunately," the word came out bitter, "look, I don't have much time. They're watching me constantly, tracking my movements. But I needed to warn you, the meeting this morning is a trap. Vought doesn't want dialogue. They want control or elimination. Homelander's convinced you're a threat to his brand, and when Homelander feels threatened, people die." "I've faced threats before," Clark said quietly. "Not like Homelander." Annie glanced around nervously. "He's not like other Soups. He's fast, strong, almost invulnerable, and he's completely insane. No empathy, no remorse, just narcissism and rage. If you fight him..." "I'm stronger," Clark said simply. Annie blinked. "You're certain?" "I felt it yesterday, in the parking garage. He did too." Clark looked up at Vought Tower. Visible in the distance, glass and chrome reflecting morning light. "That's why he's afraid. Then they'll come at you with everyone. A-Train's fast, Queen Maeve is strong, Black Noir is a killer. Together, they're still weaker than me," Clark said, not boasting, just stating physics. "Compound V enhancement has limits. Kryptonian biology doesn't." "Kryptonian?" Annie's eyes widened. "You're actually an alien? Like actually from another planet?" "Another dimension, I think. The spell that brought me here didn't feel like spatial displacement." Clark looked back at her. "Why are you warning me? If Vought discovers you helped me..." "They're already hurting me," Annie said quietly, and pulled down her collar slightly to reveal finger-shaped bruises. "The Deep assaulted me my first day. Homelander threatened to murder anyone I care about if I step out of line. Vought forced me to date a Nazi Soup for ratings. This isn't heroism, it's hell with cameras and merchandising." Her voice cracked. "When I saw you actually saving people, actually caring about the victims instead of the press coverage, I thought maybe there's hope that this world can change." Clark recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it on his Earth. in the faces of people who'd lost everything to chaos and desperately needed someone to make it stop. It was the look that had justified the regime in his mind, the expression that had convinced him absolute control was mercy. But here, in this world, the chaos was already controlled by Vought, by corporate interests, by systematic exploitation. Breaking that control wouldn't create order. It would create war. "I'm going to the meeting, Sir," Clark said, "but I'm not going to kill anyone unless they force my hand. Can you accept that?" "You don't understand," Annie said desperately. "Homelander has killed hundreds of people. A train crippled a woman because she was in his way. These aren't people who deserve mercy. They're monsters who've escaped consequences because Vought protects them. If you have the power to end this..." "I had the power to end chaos on my world," Clark interrupted. "So I took control. Absolute control. I killed anyone who threatened the order I was building, imprisoned anyone who resisted, and convinced myself I was saving humanity." He met her eyes. "I became the thing I was fighting. I won't make that mistake again. So what's your plan? Just keep stopping street crime while Vought runs the world?" "My plan is to understand why this world is broken before I decide how to fix it," Clark said. "On my Earth, I thought the problem was chaos. But the real problem was me, thinking I had the right to impose my will on everyone because I was stronger. I won't repeat that error." Annie stared at him, something like hope and despair warring in her expression. "You're really trying to be an actual hero, in a world that punishes actual heroism. Hope is what separates heroes from tyrants," Clark said, "even when hope seems impossible." A phone buzzed. Annie pulled it out, read the message, and her face went pale. "Homelander, he's looking for me. I have to go." She started to leave, then turned back. "At the meeting, don't trust anything they say. Every word will be calculated. Every gesture designed to manipulate. Vought doesn't negotiate, they dominate." "I know the type," Clark said, thinking of Lex Luthor, of Amanda Waller, of every corporate and government entity that had tried to control the regime. "Thank you for the warning." Annie nodded and hurried away, disappearing into morning pedestrian traffic. Clark watched her go, then turned his attention back to Vought Tower. In 3 hours, they would attempt to recruit or destroy him. Standard corporate villain playbook: make the offer seem generous, frame refusal as aggression, then deploy overwhelming force while controlling the narrative. Clark had dismantled entire governments using similar tactics. He rose into the air, cape catching the wind, and flew toward the Hudson River. If this meeting was going to become a fight, he needed to understand the full scope of Vought's capabilities. His super hearing swept the city, cataloging soup signatures, identifying compound V concentrations, mapping Vought facilities. The corporation had infrastructure spread across New York like a cancer. Testing facilities in Queens, marketing offices in Manhattan, production plants in New Jersey, processing compound Vi by the barrel. And everywhere, the chemical signature of enhanced individuals operating under corporate control. 37 soups in New York City alone, probably hundreds across America, thousands worldwide if Vought's reach extended that far. Breaking this system would require more than superior strength. It would require dismantling corporate power structures, exposing decades of crimes, and convincing a cynical population that actual heroism was possible. Or he could do what he'd done on his Earth, simply take control through force, impose order from above, and accept that some people would call him a tyrant while others called him a savior. Clark descended to an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront, landing on the roof. The morning sun warmed his skin, recharging his cells with familiar solar radiation. At least that hadn't changed between dimensions. Yellow sun energy still empowered Kryptonian biology. He sat on the roof's edge, legs dangling over empty air, and thought about Lois. What would she want him to do? The Lois he'd married would have said, "Expose them. Use your platform to reveal the truth. Let humanity decide how to fight back." But that Lois was dead, murdered by the Joker's manipulation. And the Clark who'd married her had died too, replaced by the regime's architect. His communicator, the one that connected to the regime's command structure on his Earth, was dead. Dimensional displacement had severed the connection. For the first time in years, he was operating without oversight, without Batman's insurgency fighting him, without the weight of ruling a planet. He was free to choose who he wanted to be. The question was, did he even remember how to be a hero instead of a tyrant? His super hearing caught movement, military helicopters approaching from the west, Vought markings on their fuselages, news choppers following at respectful distance. The media circus was beginning early, cameras positioning for optimal coverage of whatever happened at 10 a.m. Clark checked the sun's position. 8:47 a.m. He had just over an hour before the meeting. He spent it saving people. Not interventions against soups, those would come later. Just simple rescues. A construction worker whose harness broke, a child who'd wandered into traffic, an elderly woman having a heart attack. The kind of saves that didn't make headlines but reminded him why the S-Shield had meant something before the regime. Each rescue, people looked at him with fear first, gratitude second. The opposite of how it had been on his Earth, before Metropolis burned. By the time 9:45 arrived, Clark had saved 11 people and stopped 3 minor crimes. And for the first time since arriving in this dimension, he felt something like clarity. He couldn't trust himself to be this world's absolute authority, but he could be its example. Show them what actual heroism looked like. Force Vought to operate in his shadow, adapting their behavior or revealing their true nature. And if they forced him to fight, if Homelander or the Seven attacked him, he would respond with exactly the amount of force necessary, no more, no less. Not the regime's overwhelming retaliation, not the tyrant's disproportionate response, just measured, necessary defense. He could do this. He could be better than what he'd become. Clark rose into the air and flew toward Vought Tower, the morning sun warm on his back, the S-Shield gleaming on his chest. Below, the city watched. Cameras tracked his flight path. News anchors speculated about his intentions. Vought executives finalized their trap. And in the regime's absence, in this broken world that desperately needed someone to show them heroes could exist, Superman prepared to walk into the lion's den, not as a conqueror, as hope. Vought Tower's main auditorium was designed for spectacle. 300 seats arranged in tiered rows, massive screens flanking a central stage, cameras positioned for optimal coverage. Every seat was filled with journalists, influencers, and Vought executives. The energy in the room crackled with anticipation, predatory and eager. Superman descended through the open skylight at exactly 10 a.m. No dramatic entrance, no sonic boom, just a controlled descent that landed him center stage with barely a sound. The audience gasped anyway, partly at the arrival method, mostly at seeing him up close. The costume was impossibly clean, despite a night of interventions, the S-Shield catching stage lights like a beacon. The Seven stood in a line behind a podium bearing Vought's logo. Homelander at the center, smile fixed in place but eyes tracking Superman's every micro movement. Queen Maeve to his left, statuesque and bored, A-Train vibrating with barely contained energy. The Deep looking nervous. Black Noir utterly still, a void in human shape. Starlight at the far end, and when Clark's eyes met hers, she gave the tiniest shake of her head. Don't trust them. Madeline Stillwell approached from stage right, heels clicking on polished floor, hand extended in greeting. Superman, thank you for accepting our invitation. I'm Madeline Stillwell, VP of Hero Management at Vought International. Clark took her hand carefully. Human bones were fragile, and his strength could pulverize her skeleton without effort. Her grip was firm, professional, but her heartbeat spiked when his hand enclosed hers. Fear masked by corporate confidence. Miss Stillwell, he acknowledged. Please, call me Madeline. We're all friends here. She gestured to the assembled crowd. We've gathered the press to witness what we hope will be a historic moment. Vought International welcoming the newest hero to our family. I haven't agreed to join anything, Clark said clearly, voice carrying to every camera and microphone. Stillwell's smile didn't waver. Of course, this is simply an opportunity for dialogue, to understand your goals, your capabilities, and how Vought might support your heroic mission. She turned to address the cameras. Superman appeared in our city yesterday and has already made significant impact, 17 interventions in one night. That kind of dedication to public safety aligns perfectly with Vought's values. Clark's super hearing picked up the murmurs from the press section. Several journalists were receiving real-time updates through earpieces. Talking points, probably, fed by Vought's PR team. The narrative was being controlled even as it unfolded. "Your values," Clark repeated. "Tell me about those values, Ms. Stillwell. Do they include soups extorting small businesses, assaulting civilians, operating without accountability?" The room went very quiet. Homelander's smile gained an edge. Stillwell's composure cracked for just a moment. A micro-expression of surprise that Clark's enhanced sight caught clearly. She'd expected him to play along with the corporate theater, not attack immediately. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," she recovered smoothly. "Vought maintains the highest standards for heroic conduct. Every member of the Seven undergoes extensive training, psychological evaluation, and operates under strict ethical guidelines. If you've witnessed behavior that concerns you, we have internal review processes." "I witnessed Homelander threatening to murder a civilian in a parking garage," Clark interrupted. "I witnessed Tech Knight attempting sexual assault. I witnessed multiple soups using their powers for personal gain, while Vaught's review processes did nothing. Your organization doesn't maintain heroes. It manufactures weapons and markets them as saviors." The press section erupted. Questions shouted, cameras zooming. Stillwell's professional mask slipped further, jaw tightening. Homelander stepped forward, and the room's energy shifted. He moved with Predator's grace, cape billowing, that manufactured smile still in place. "I think Superman's confused about what he saw. That woman in the parking garage was a terrorist sympathizer. I was conducting enhanced interrogation under federal authorization." "But hey!" He spread his hands in a gesture of magnanimous understanding. "New hero, doesn't know the protocols yet. We can educate him." "I have excellent hearing," Clark said. "Enhanced interrogation doesn't include discussing Twitter insults." Homelander's left eye twitched. "You calling me a liar?" "I'm calling you exactly what you are," Clark said quietly. "A predator in a flag." The temperature in the room dropped. Homelander's smile vanished completely, replaced by something cold and vast. "You want to be very careful what you say next." "Or what?" Clark asked. "You'll drop me from a parking garage? Laser me with heat vision that can't penetrate my skin? Throw a tantrum because someone finally called out your behavior?" Homelander's eyes ignited. Red glow building, heat vision charging. The audience gasped, some diving for cover. Cameras kept rolling. "John," Stillwell said sharply, "stand down." But Homelander wasn't listening anymore. His heat vision lanced out, twin beams of concentrated thermal energy that would have vaporized a normal human. They hit Superman's chest and dispersed harmlessly, red light scattering across the S-shield like water on stone. Clark didn't move, didn't flinch. Just stood there while Homelander poured energy into an attack that accomplished exactly nothing. After 5 seconds, Homelander cut off the beams, breathing hard. "What?" Superman's eyes ignited in response. But where Homelander's heat vision had been intense, Clark's was an order of magnitude beyond. The red glow that emanated from his eyes made stage lights look dim, heat radiating outward in visible waves. He aimed past Homelander, through the wall behind the stage, and released a microsecond pulse. The beam punched through reinforced concrete, steel support beams, and 3 additional walls before Clark shut it down. A perfectly circular hole remained, edges still glowing orange with residual heat. Through it, New York City was visible, and distant car alarms began wailing from the thermal shockwave. "That's heat vision," Clark said quietly. "What you have is a flashlight." The auditorium was utterly silent. Homelander stared at the hole, then at Superman, something like existential horror dawning in his expression. For his entire life, he'd been the strongest, the fastest, the most powerful. Vaught's perfect weapon, unmatched and untouchable. And in 5 seconds, Superman had demonstrated the gulf between them was infinite. "This meeting is over," Stan Edgar's voice came from the back of the auditorium. The CEO walked down the center aisle, immaculate suit, expression unchanged. "Clear the room, press conference postponed, 7 combat positions." The journalists didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled for exits, cameras still recording, capturing every moment as Vault's controlled narrative collapsed into chaos. The seven spread out across the stage. A-Train blurred to Superman's left. Queen Maeve moved right. Black Noir melted into shadows behind the ruined wall. The Deep backed toward the wings, clearly wanting no part of this. Starlight remained frozen at stage edge, horror and fascination warring in her expression. Homelander floated upward, putting distance between himself and Clark. You made a mistake coming here. You're strong, I'll give you that. But you're one soup against the seven, against Vought, against a corporation that injects babies with chemicals to create weapons, Clark interrupted. Against heroes who rape and murder without consequences. Against a system built on exploiting the powerless. He rose into the air to match Homelander's altitude. I've fought worse than you. I've beaten armies, overthrown governments, imposed order on an entire planet. The only question is whether I repeat those mistakes here or find a better way. Mistakes? Homelander's laugh was brittle. You sound like you regret having power. That's weakness. Power is the only thing that matters. Power is what separates gods from insects. I know, Clark said quietly. I used to think exactly like you. Used to believe that strength gave me the right to decide for everyone, to kill anyone who threatened my vision of order. He looked at Homelander, really looked, with X-ray vision and super sight that saw past the costume to the broken thing underneath. But power without restraint isn't godhood. It's just another form of weakness. A-Train moved first, supersonic blur crossing the stage in milliseconds, fist cocked for a strike enhanced by momentum and compound V strength. Clark caught the punch one-handed without looking, fingers closing around A-Train's fist and arresting all that kinetic energy instantly. A-Train's shoulder dislocated from the sudden stop. He screamed. Clark released him and A-Train staggered back, cradling his arm. Medical attention, Clark said. Now, before the damage becomes permanent. Queen Maeve charged from the right. Warriors roar, fist aimed at Clark's jaw with enough force to shatter concrete. He blocked with his forearm, and the impact created a shockwave that shattered remaining stage lights. Maeve's eyes widened as her enhanced strength met immovable resistance. I don't want to hurt you, Clark said. Fuck you, Maeve snarled, and drove her knee toward his midsection. Clark caught her leg, used her own momentum to redirect her away from him. She tumbled across the stage, rolled to her feet with warrior's grace, breathing hard. Black Noir emerged from shadows, twin blades aimed for Superman's throat and kidney, assassin's precision, killer's intent. The weapons shattered against Kryptonian skin, metal fragments scattering. Noir froze, staring at the broken blades. You're fighting someone whose skin is denser than steel, Clark said. Your weapons can't hurt me. Your strength can't match me. And I'm holding back. Homelander attacked from above, full power dive. Both fists aimed at Superman's head, heat vision blazing. Clark met him in midair, caught both wrists, and they hung there. Two figures in capes, Homelander straining with everything he had while Clark held him effortlessly at bay. This is the difference between us, Clark said, voice low enough that only Homelander could hear. You think power makes you special, makes you better, gives you license to hurt people weaker than you. He squeezed slightly, just enough that Homelander's wrist bones creaked. But I've met real gods, real warriors, real monsters, and you're not even close to the worst thing I've fought. Then kill me, Homelander hissed, something desperate in his eyes. If you're so much stronger, so much better, prove it. Show everyone what you really are. And there it was, the trap within the trap. Homelander wanted Clark to kill him, wanted to force Superman into becoming the thing he'd been on his Earth. Because if Clark killed him, Vaught's narrative was saved. Superman becomes the uncontrolled threat, the murderer, the tyrant who needs to be stopped. Clark released Homelander and descended back to the stage. I'm not going to kill you, any of you, because that's not what heroes do. Heroes? Homelander laughed, the sound cracking into something manic. There are no heroes. There's just strong and weak. And the strong do whatever they want because nobody can stop them. That's the truth. That's reality. You're just too naive to accept it. I accepted it once, Clark said. On my Earth, I became exactly what you are. The strong doing whatever I wanted, enforcing my will because I believed I knew better. And it cost me everything. My wife, my humanity, my heroism. He looked at each member of the Seven in turn. I won't make that mistake again, even in a world this broken. Stan Edgar had remained near the auditorium entrance throughout the entire confrontation. Now he stepped forward, slow applause echoing in the damaged space. Impressive speech, wonderful restraint, very heroic. His tone held no warmth. You've made your point, Superman. You're stronger than our assets. Faster, more durable. Congratulations. But strength isn't strategy. And while you've been playing hero, refusing to kill, showing mercy, we've been recording everything. The screens that flanked the stage flickered to life. Footage began playing. Superman's interventions from the past day, but edited. Context removed. Groundhog's injuries emphasized. Civilians fleeing in terror. Property damage highlighted. The narrative being built in real time. Superman as threat, not savior. You're strong, Edgar continued. But what controls the narrative? The media, the government contracts, the infrastructure that decides what heroism means in this country. You can win every physical fight and still lose the war. He gestured to the screens. By tomorrow morning, you'll be branded a vigilante threat. Police will have arrest warrants. Politicians will demand regulation. The public will fear you. And the Seven, injured, victimized by your unprovoked attack, will be seen as the heroes who tried to reason with an out-of-control soup. Clark looked at the manipulated footage, at the corporate machinery designed to turn truth into lies, at the system that had normalized superpowered predation by controlling every narrative, every message, every piece of information the public received. On his Earth, the regime had controlled narratives too. State media, propaganda, information warfare, all in service of maintaining the order Clark had imposed. Was this really any different? Wasn't Edgar just another version of what Clark had become? Someone using power to enforce their vision of how the world should work? You're right, Clark said quietly. I can't beat your propaganda machine. Can't control every story, every camera, every journalist. But I can do something you can't. What's that? Edgar asked. I can keep being a hero, Clark said. Keep saving people. Keep stopping crimes. Keep demonstrating what actual heroism looks like, over and over, until people remember that capes used to mean something good. You can spin stories, manipulate footage, buy politicians, but you can't edit reality. And reality is this. Every day I operate, I'll be proof that heroes can exist. That power doesn't have to corrupt. That strength can protect instead of prey. He rose toward the skylight, cape billowing. Tell whatever story you want. I'll keep telling mine through action. And when we deploy military assets, Edgar called after him, when the government classifies you as a threat and authorizes lethal force, Clark paused at the skylight, looking back. Then you'll discover what I already learned on my Earth. Forcing someone to become the monster you claim they are creates exactly the threat you were afraid of. I'm giving you a choice, Mr. Edgar. Adapt to a world where actual heroism exists, or keep feeding the corruption until it destroys you. He left through the skylight, accelerating into clear sky, while cameras captured his departure. Behind him, Vault Tower stood damaged but functional, and inside, corporate machinery began the work of destroying Superman's reputation. But somewhere in the city, Annie January watched footage of Superman refusing to kill Homelander despite clear provocation, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The backlash was immediate and overwhelming. By noon, every major news network was running edited footage on loop. Superman attacking the Seven unprovoked. Homelander, America's greatest hero, bravely standing against a violent alien threat. A-Train hospitalized with severe injuries. Vault Tower damaged by reckless use of heat vision. Experts discussing the danger of unregulated soups operating without oversight. Clark watched it from a rooftop in Queens, super hearing tuned to multiple broadcasts simultaneously. The narrative Edgar had promised was unfolding exactly as designed. Politicians called for Superman's immediate arrest. Military analysts discussed countermeasures. Social media exploded with debates about whether he was hero or menace, and underneath it all, the quiet sound of someone crying. Clark focused his hearing, filtering through city noise to find the source. An apartment building 6 blocks north, 3rd floor, female, young, hyperventilating through tears, and another heartbeat, elevated, aggressive, chemically enhanced. He was moving before conscious thought, crossing the distance in seconds and landing on the fire escape outside the apartment. Through the wall, his X-ray vision showed a woman backed into a corner, while a soup in costume, one he didn't recognize, some C-lister with enhanced strength, advanced toward her. "Told you what would happen if you talked to journalists," the soupy was saying. "Told you that Vote takes care of problems quietly, but you just had to." Clark ripped the fire escape window out of its frame and stepped inside. The soup spun, fists rising. "What the fuck?" "Leave," Clark said quietly. "Now." The soup looked at Superman, looked at the woman, calculation flickering across his face. Then he smiled, predatory, confident. "You're the alien everyone's talking about, the one who attacked the 7. Dude, you're public enemy #1 right now. You really want to add assaulting another hero to your..." Clark was across the room before the soup finished his sentence, hand wrapped around the man's throat, lifting him effortlessly. "I said leave. I won't say it again." The soup's eyes went wide, tried to speak, couldn't, struggled uselessly against Kryptonian strength. Clark carried him to the window and threw him out, not far, just enough to clear the fire escape. The soup hit the alley dumpster with a crash of buckling metal. Clark turned to the woman. She was pressed against the wall, shaking, staring at him with the same fear she'd shown the previous soup. "You're safe," he said gently. "He won't hurt you." You're Superman," she managed. "The news says you're dangerous, that you attacked Homelander, that..." "The news is lying," Clark said. "Vought controls the narrative. They're trying to discredit me because I'm threatening their business model." He glanced at the window, tracking the soup's retreat with super hearing. "Why was he threatening you?" The woman's jaw trembled. "I'm a paralegal. I was working on a case, a wrongful death suit against Vought. Family whose daughter was killed by a soup during a rescue. I found evidence that Vought knew the soup was unstable, that they'd covered up previous incidents. When I tried to file the documents," she gestured helplessly, "that was my 3rd warning. They said the 4th warning would be permanent." Clark felt something cold settle in his chest. On his Earth, the regime had used similar tactics. Quiet warnings, escalating threats, eventual elimination of anyone who endangered the order. He justified it as necessary, as protecting the greater good. This was what that looked like from the other side. "What's your name, Mirachar?" he asked. Sarah Chen." "Sarah, I need you to do something difficult. I need you to keep fighting. Keep filing those documents. Keep building that case. Vaught's power comes from operating in shadows. Expose them to light, and their control breaks." "Easy for you to say," Sarah said, voice cracking. "You're bulletproof. I'm just a paralegal who's about to disappear into a Vought black site if I don't drop this." "You won't disappear," Clark said. "I'll be watching. Anyone who comes after you will have to go through me first. You can't watch everyone. You can't protect every person Vought threatens. There are hundreds of us. Journalists, lawyers, activists, whistleblowers. We all know what happens if we push too hard. We all know people who vanished." She met his eyes. "You're one person against a machine." Clark had heard those exact words on his Earth. From Bruce Wayne, arguing against the regime. From Diana, warning him about overextension. From every resistance member who'd correctly identified that one person, no matter how powerful, couldn't control everything. The difference was that on his Earth, Clark had responded by building an authoritarian system, infrastructure of control, networks of surveillance, regime soldiers enforcing his will everywhere he couldn't be. Here, he had none of that, just himself, his powers, and a city full of people who'd learned that resistance meant death. "Then I'll be a very busy person," Clark said, "but I won't let them silence everyone. I promise you that." Sarah stared at him, something like hope flickering in her expression. "You really believe you can fight Vought? With every media outlet against you, every politician in their pocket, every..." I've fought worse odds, Clark said, and won. The question isn't whether I can fight them. It's whether I can fight them without becoming them. His super hearing caught it. Helicopters approaching from the south. Military signature. Multiple units. And beneath the rotor noise, radio chatter. Target confirmed, Superman in civilian building. Authorization for engagement. They were coming for him. Edgar had been faster than expected. Get down, Clark told Sarah. Stay away from windows. He moved to the apartment's front door just as it exploded inward. Armored soldiers poured through. Not police, not National Guard. Private military contractors in tactical gear, weapons raised, Vaught's logo on their shoulders. Target acquired, one of them barked into his radio. Superman, you are under arrest for... Clark was in front of the speaker before the man finished his sentence, hand gently removing the rifle from his grip. No. The other soldiers opened fire. Automatic weapons, armor-piercing rounds, enough firepower to shred concrete. The bullets bounced off Superman's skin like rain, ricocheting around the apartment. Clark winced as one nearly hit Sarah. He'd have to be more careful about positioning. He moved through the soldiers like wind through grass, disarming each one with surgical precision. Rifles removed, sidearms confiscated, every weapon in his hands within 3 seconds. The soldiers backed away, hands raised, radios screaming with confusion. I'm not your enemy, Clark said clearly. I'm not a threat. I'm trying to help the city. But if Vought keeps sending people to attack me, someone's going to get hurt. Stand down. Can't do that, sir, one of the soldiers said. And Clark heard the tremor beneath the professional tone. These were just men following orders. Contractors paid to engage a target they'd been told was dangerous. They had no idea they were being used in a corporate publicity stunt. More explosions, windows shattering as soldiers fast roped from helicopters onto the fire escape. Tactical teams storming the building from below. At least 40 combatants converging on one apartment, and through the walls, Clark could see terrified civilians huddling in adjacent units. This was going to be Vaught's next news story. Superman causing chaos in residential building, endangering civilians, resisting lawful arrest. And the worst part was, they were right about the danger. Every second he stayed, more people were at risk. But if he left, Sarah would be defenseless. Vought would disappear her, eliminate the evidence, bury the case. The regime had faced similar calculations. When protecting one person endangered many, Clark had sacrificed the one for the greater good, made the hard choice, lived with the consequences. But that was how tyrants thought. Clark's eyes blazed red, not heat vision, just the glow of Kryptonian biology channeling solar energy. He addressed the apartment at large, voice pitched to carry to every soldier and civilian within earshot. Everyone listen, I'm leaving, but I'm taking Sarah Chen with me, and I'm making this promise publicly. Anyone who harms her, threatens her, or impedes her legal work will answer to me personally. Vought, if you're listening, and I know you are, your days of operating through fear are over. Light is coming to your dark places. He scooped Sarah up gently, she yelped in surprise, and launched through the roof. The apartment's ceiling exploded upward as Superman carried her into open sky, helicopters scattering from his sudden emergence. Sarah screamed, arms locked around his neck, as New York dropped away beneath them. Sorry for the abrupt departure, Clark said over the wind noise. Where would you feel safe? Safe? Sarah laughed hysterically. There's nowhere safe from Vought. My friend, a voice crackled from below. Billy Butcher, shouting through a megaphone from a rooftop 3 blocks away. Bring her here. Clark hesitated. The boys were killers, operating outside any legal framework, but they were also the only organization actively fighting Vaught's control. And right now, Sarah needed protection he couldn't provide while operating alone. He descended to Butcher's rooftop, landing gently and setting Sarah on her feet. She immediately bent over, hyperventilating. Thanks for the rescue, she gasped. Next time, maybe warn someone before you turn them into a projectile? Butcher approached, MM and Frenchie flanking him. Sarah Chen, yeah, we know about your case. Been tracking it for weeks. You're the paralegal who found the buried reports on Thermal, the soup who cooked that girl alive during a bank robbery. How did you? Sarah started. We make it our business to know Vaught's dirty laundry, Butcher said. The question is what you're going to do with that evidence now that Superman's made you a target. I'm filing it, Sarah said, straightening despite the fear in her eyes. I'm going public. If Superman's willing to fight them, so am I. You understand they'll come after you, said seriously. Vought doesn't play. They've disappeared lawyers, journalists, anyone who threatens their bottom line. You go public, you paint a target on yourself permanently. I already have a target, Sarah said. At least this way, it means something. Clark felt something crack in his chest, the same feeling he'd had when Lois had refused to stop investigating Intergang, despite death threats. Pride mixed with terror, recognition that some people would fight for justice even when fighting meant dying. We can protect her, Butcher said, looking at Superman. Got a safe house, security, everything she needs to finish building that case. But, he gestured to the helicopter circling above. You're making this complicated. Every time you show your face, Vought sends an army. You're a walking declaration of war. Good, Clark said flatly. War is what they deserve. War is what gets innocent people killed, countered. You saw what just happened. 40 soldiers in a residential building because you were there. How many civilians could have caught stray bullets? How many are terrified right now because Supes are fighting in their neighborhood again? It was the exact argument Bruce Wayne had made against the regime's tactics. Collateral damage, escalating violence, the civilians caught between two forces, both claiming to protect them. Then what's your solution? Clark asked. I leave, stop fighting, let Vought operate unopposed? Our solution is surgical, Butcher said. We identify the worst offenders, the rapists, the killers, the ones who've earned death, and we eliminate them quietly. No spectacle, no collateral damage, just removal of threats. You want to fight Vought? Stop making yourself the story. Work with us, use your power strategically. Take down the system piece by piece instead of smashing through everything. Clark looked at the four humans in front of him, scarred, hardened, operating from a place of deep trauma and justified rage. They'd seen their world fail to hold Supes accountable, seen their justice system corrupted, seen their heroes revealed as monsters, and they'd responded by becoming monsters themselves, convinced that killing was the only language power understood. He'd been there, become that, stood over the Joker's corpse and felt righteous. I can't kill for you, he said, but I can help you expose them. Use my powers to gather evidence, document crimes, build cases that even Vought's lawyers can't dismiss. Shine light instead of bringing death. Light doesn't work against people who own the cameras, Butcher said flatly. Then we find cameras they don't own, Clark countered. Independent journalists, international press, social media. Vought controls American infrastructure, but they don't control everything. We bypass their systems. Frenchie spoke up, voice thoughtful. It could work. Vaught's power is narrative control, but narratives can be disrupted. Superman appears on Al Jazeera, BBC, independent streams. Evidence of Vought crimes presented directly to global audience. They cannot suppress everything simultaneously. It's slower than killing, Butcher warned. Gives them time to retaliate, to hurt more people while we're building cases. But it doesn't make me a tyrant, Clark said quietly. Doesn't force me to decide who lives and dies based on my judgment. I've walked that path. It led somewhere dark. Sarah raised her hand tentatively, like a student in class. Can I vote? Because the person actually being protected here would like to not be part of a murder conspiracy. Superman's right. Expose them legally. My case is solid. If we can add more evidence, more witnesses, build a pattern that even Vought can't deny, they'll tie it up in courts for decades, said. Corporate lawyers, endless appeals, judges in their pocket. Court of public opinion moves faster, Sarah countered, especially if Superman is standing next to me when I present evidence. They can control narrative, but they can't control him. He's walking proof that their story is lies. Butcher stared at her, then at Superman, jaw working. Finally, fine, we do it your way. Gather evidence, build cases, shine your fucking light. But, he pointed at Clark, when it fails, when people die because we're playing nice, we do it my way. And you don't get to be squeamish about what that means. If it fails, Clark said, I'll accept responsibility. but I won't become what I was. What were you? Butcher asked. Someone who decided killing was mercy, Clark said. Someone who imposed order through fear. Someone who looked at a broken world and decided that absolute control was the only solution. He met Butcher's eyes. Someone exactly like Homelander, just with better intentions. The rooftop went quiet. Above, helicopters maintained distance, cameras still rolling. Vought would be analyzing this meeting, planning counter moves, preparing their next assault. "We need to move," said, checking his phone. "Vaught's sending more contractors, and they're not coming with arrest warrants this time." Clark's super hearing confirmed it. Military vehicles converging from multiple directions, heavier weapons, tactics shifting from containment to elimination. "Where's your safe house?" he asked Butcher. "Somewhere you can't follow," Butcher said. "You're radioactive right now. Anywhere you go, Vought can track. We disappear Sarah properly, you draw their attention elsewhere." "He's right," Sarah said quietly. "You've done enough, more than anyone else would. Let them protect me. You go be the symbol you're talking about." Clark wanted to argue. Every instinct screamed against trusting these people, against letting Sarah out of his sight. On his Earth, the regime had maintained control through direct oversight. Nothing happened without Superman's knowledge, without his approval. But that was the problem. That was how tyranny worked. Total control masquerading as protection. "Okay," he said. "But Sarah," he looked at her directly. "If anything happens, if you need help, scream. I'll hear you." "Anywhere in the city." "Anywhere?" she asked. "Anywhere on the eastern seaboard," Clark clarified. "My hearing range is extensive." Butcher snorted. "Fucking soups, violating every privacy law without blinking." "I don't listen to private conversations," Clark said. "Just screams, cries for help, the sounds of people suffering." "Must be noisy," observed. "Constantly," Clark admitted. "This world is loud with pain." The boys began moving Sarah toward the roof access door. She paused, looked back at Superman. "Thank you for believing people are worth fighting for." "Always," Clark said. They disappeared into the building. Clark rose into the air, tracking their exit with super hearing as they moved through underground passages he hadn't known existed. Good. If he didn't know where they were going, Vought couldn't extract it from him. The helicopters closed in, 6 now, bristling with weapons. A voice boomed through loudspeakers. "Superman, by order of the Department of Homeland Security, you are classified as an extra-normal threat to national security. Land immediately or we will open fire." Clark looked at the helicopters, at the cameras, at the weapons aimed at him. Edgar's next move: force him to fight American military assets, brand him as domestic terrorist. He could destroy every helicopter without breaking a sweat, could disable their weapons, ground their vehicles, end this threat in seconds, or he could leave, refuse to play Vaught's game, demonstrate that he wasn't the threat they claimed. Clark flew straight up, not away, just vertical, accelerating past the helicopters before they could track his movement. He climbed through cloud cover, into the stratosphere where their cameras couldn't follow, where the air was too thin for their rotors. And he hovered there, looking down at New York from 50,000 feet, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a living organism. Somewhere down there, Sarah was being hidden. The boys were planning their next move. Vought was spinning their narrative, and millions of people were suffering under a system that called oppression heroism. Clark had broken a world once, trying to save it. He wouldn't make that mistake again, but he would save this one, somehow, without becoming its tyrant, even if it killed him. 72 hours. That's how long Clark gave Vought to make the next move. 3 days of operating in the shadows, gathering evidence, documenting crimes, no public interventions, no dramatic rescues. Just surgical intelligence gathering using powers that made him the perfect investigative tool. He spent the first night cataloging Vought facilities across the eastern seaboard. X-ray vision penetrating walls, super hearing recording conversations, photographic memory absorbing documents through office windows, compound V production plants, testing facilities where they injected infants, black sites where problem soups disappeared, financial records showing bribes to senators, judges, police chiefs. The corruption was comprehensive, systematic, absolute. The second night, he focused on the 7, followed them on patrols during downtime, in private moments. What he discovered made the Joker look merciful by comparison. Homelander murdered a civilian who'd photographed him without permission. Just grabbed the man's head and squeezed until it popped like a grape, then flew away laughing. The Deep sexually assaulted 3 women in 2 days, used his celebrity status and physical intimidation to corner them, knowing Volt's lawyers would bury any complaints. A-Train dealt drugs to teenagers, compound V derivatives, highly addictive, causing enhancement addiction in developing bodies. All with Volt's tacit approval because it created future customers. Black Noir was a serial killer, actual bodies buried in a warehouse basement, at least 17 victims over 5 years. Vought knew. They'd cleaned up evidence multiple times. Only Queen Maeve and Starlight showed any humanity, and Maeve was drowning it in alcohol while Annie struggled against a system designed to break her spirit. Clark recorded everything. Video evidence, audio confessions, GPS coordinates of burial sites, financial transactions, a comprehensive case that would destroy Vaught's public image if presented correctly. The question was how to present it. On the third night, he met with the boys in their safe house, a basement beneath a butcher shop, appropriately enough. Butcher, Frenchie, and Huey sat around a table covered in Clark's evidence, faces growing progressively darker as they reviewed the files. "Fuck me," Butcher whispered, staring at footage of Homelander killing the photographer. "We knew he was a psycho, but he's not even trying to hide it anymore. Because he doesn't have to," said grimly. "Vought controls the narrative. Even with this evidence, they'll spin it. Deep fake technology, edited footage. Superman fabricating evidence to justify his vendetta." "Not if we release it everywhere simultaneously," Huey suggested. "Flood the zone. Every news outlet, every social media platform, Vought will suppress it," Frenchie interrupted. "They have algorithms, content moderation teams, government contacts, information this dangerous. They will kill it before it spreads." Clark had been listening silently, floating cross-legged a few inches above the concrete floor. Now he spoke. "Then we don't release it digitally. We hold a press conference. Physical presence, live streaming, multiple independent cameras. Make it impossible to suppress because it's happening in real time across platforms they don't control. They'll send the 7, Butcher said flatly, interrupt the conference, kill everyone involved, blame it on you." "Let them," Clark said. "I'll be there, and this time, I won't hold back." The room went very still. "Thought you weren't going to kill," said carefully. "I'm not," Clark clarified, "but I will defend people. If the 7 attack civilians at a press conference, I will stop them. Permanently if necessary." "There's the tyrant," Butcher said, something like satisfaction in his voice. "Knew you'd come around eventually." "I'm not a tyrant for protecting innocent people from murderers," Clark said. "There's a difference between execution and defense, between imposing my will and responding to aggression." "Philosophical distinction," Butcher countered. "Dead is dead, mate. Whether you kill them proactively or reactively doesn't change the corpse count." "It changes me," Clark said quietly. "It changes whether I'm acting from authority or necessity, whether I'm deciding who deserves death or responding to immediate threats. That line matters." "Does it?" Butcher pulled out a file from the stack. Black Noir's victims. Photographs of bodies, autopsy reports, families destroyed. "These people are dead because you drew that line, because you're waiting for Noir to attack someone in front of you before you act. How is that moral? How is letting him kill again and again, while you wait for the right circumstances, anything but cowardice dressed up as principle?" It was the argument Clark had used against Bruce Wayne, against every hero who'd refused to kill the Joker after the 100th escape, the 1,000th victim, the exact justification that had led to the regime. "You're right," Clark said, and watched surprise flicker across Butcher's face. "You're absolutely right that my principles have a cost, that people die while I maintain lines I've drawn. But here's what I learned on my Earth. The moment I decided those lines didn't matter, The moment I convinced myself that preemptive killing was justified, I became unstoppable. Not because of my powers, because I'd removed the only thing that constrained me, my own moral code. He stood, boots touching concrete. Without that code, I killed the Joker. Then I killed anyone who threatened my vision of order. Then I imprisoned my best friend for opposing me. Then I conquered a planet because I'd convinced myself it needed conquering. The line between killing monsters and becoming the monster isn't philosophical, it's survival. Not for them, for me. So we're supposed to let Noir keep killing because you're afraid of yourself? Butcher demanded. No, Clark said. We expose him. We force Vought to act. We make his crimes so public that even their propaganda machine can't suppress it. And if he attacks during that exposure, if he tries to kill anyone in my presence, I will end him. Defense, not execution. Response, not authority. And if Vought buries the evidence anyway? MM asked. If we hold this conference and nothing changes? Clark met his eyes. Then I'll accept that I was wrong, that this world requires darker methods, and I'll do what's necessary, knowing full well what it will cost me. Huey spoke up, voice tentative. There might be another option, someone who could help us get this evidence out without vote suppression. Who? Butcher asked. Victoria Newman, Huey said. Congresswoman. She's been making noise about soup accountability, holding hearings about Vaught's practices. She's positioned as their opposition in government. Butcher's laugh was sharp and joyless. Newman's controlled opposition, you naive twit. Vought plants her to make oversight look real while she rubber stamps everything they want. She's as corrupt as the rest. How do you know? Huey challenged. Because everyone in this city is corrupt, Butcher said flatly. That's how Vought maintains power. They compromise everyone. Newman's just better at hiding it. Clark's super hearing had been tracking heartbeats throughout the conversation, reading stress levels and deception markers. Butcher believed what he was saying, genuinely believed systemic corruption was total and inescapable. It was the mindset of someone who'd lost faith in everything except revenge. I'll investigate Newman, Clark said. Verify her allegiance. If she's legitimate, she could provide governmental cover for releasing the evidence. If she's compromised, we'll know to avoid her. And how exactly do you plan to investigate a congresswoman without it looking like intimidation? MM asked. I follow her, Clark said simply. Watch who she meets with, what she does when cameras aren't present. My senses can detect lies, identify chemical signatures of compound V exposure, track financial transactions through paperwork. If she's Vaught's plant, I'll find evidence. Stalking, Frenchie observed. This is what we call stalking, mon ami. Intelligence gathering, Clark corrected. The same thing you do. We're not bulletproof aliens with God complexes, Butcher said. We get caught, we die. You get caught, you just demonstrate why soups can't be trusted with power. Then I won't get caught, Clark said. He rose toward the basement ceiling, preparing to phase through the concrete. Wait, Huey called. If you're investigating Newman, there's something you should know. She has a daughter, Zoe, 8 years old. Newman's really protective of her, keeps her completely out of public eye. If you're watching Newman and the kid shows up, I won't involve children, Clark said immediately. Whatever Newman's done, her daughter is innocent. Yeah, Huey said quietly. Just, Vought doesn't see it that way. They go after families, threaten kids to keep parents compliant. If Newman is genuine opposition, her daughter is leverage. Be careful. Clark nodded and phased through the ceiling, emerging into the alley above. The night air was cold, but his Kryptonian biology barely registered temperature changes. He rose into the sky, becoming invisible against the darkness, and began searching for Victoria Newman. Finding her took 17 minutes. Congressional apartment in Georgetown, but she was currently in New York for committee meetings. Clark tracked her to a hotel in Manhattan, 23rd floor, suite with enhanced security. He hovered outside her window, vision penetrating walls. Newman sat at a desk, reviewing documents. Normal congressional work, budget proposals, constituent letters, policy briefs, nothing immediately suspicious. But as Clark watched, she took a call, held the phone to her ear, and her entire demeanor changed. The professional congresswoman melted away, replaced by something harder, colder. "I understand," she said into the phone. "The hearing will focus on regulatory oversight, but we'll make sure no binding legislation results. Just theater for the public." "Yes, I'm aware of Superman's evidence gathering. Edgar briefed me. If he contacts me, I'll play cooperative. Offer governmental alliance. Then we extract everything he knows and eliminate him." "Children?" "Stan, I have a daughter. I won't—" She went silent, listening. "Fine. But the girl stays protected. That's non-negotiable." Clark's enhanced hearing picked up the voice on the other end. Stan Edgar, confirming Newman was indeed Vought's asset in Congress. But there was something else. As Newman argued about protecting the girl, her stress levels spiked. Genuine fear, not performance. And when she hung up, she immediately pulled out a second phone. Burner, untraceable, and made another call. "Mallory," Newman said quietly. "It's me." "No, secure line. Edgar knows about Superman's investigation. They're planning to use me as bait, extract his intelligence, then eliminate him. I don't know, but we're running out of time. If Superman gets killed before we can—" She stopped. "Yes, Zoe's safe. I made sure." Grace Mallory. Clark had heard that name in the boys' conversations. Former CIA, ran black ops against Supes in the 80s, now operating independently. If Newman was reporting to Mallory— "You can stop pretending I'm not here," Clark said, phasing through the window into her hotel room. Newman spun, hand reaching for something in her desk drawer. She froze when she saw him, phone dropping from her other hand. "Superman," she managed, breaking and entering a congresswoman's hotel room. "Very heroic." "I heard your conversations," Clark said. "Both of them. You're playing both sides, reporting to Edgar while feeding intelligence to Mallory. Question is, which side are you actually on?" Newman's hand stayed near the drawer. Clark's X-ray vision identified a pistol, useless against him, but revealing about her threat assessment. She thought she might need it. "You don't understand the situation," Newman said carefully. "Vought owns everything. Government, media, infrastructure. Fighting them openly is suicide. So some of us fight from inside, smile at their meetings, vote for their bills, and feed information to people who can actually stop them. While children die," Clark said, "while Homelander murders, while the Seven terrorize. You're comfortable letting that continue as long as you can tell yourself you're working against them eventually?" "As opposed to what?" Newman's composure cracked slightly. "Flying in with god powers and smashing everything? You've been here less than a week, and you've already destabilized the entire eastern seaboard. Vaught's deploying military assets, Edgar's calling in government favors. You've got warrants in 7 states. How is that helping?" "It's forcing the confrontation," Clark said. "Vought operated in shadows because nobody challenged them. Now someone is. Now they have to respond openly, reveal their methods, show the public what they really are." "The public doesn't care," Newman said flatly. "You think people don't know the Seven are monsters? They know. They just don't care because Homelander makes them feel safe. Because A-Train is entertaining. Because Vought has spent decades conditioning them to worship Supes despite everything. Your crusade isn't revealing truth, it's threatening comfort, and people will choose comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth every single time." Clark had heard similar arguments on his Earth, from politicians who opposed the regime not because it was authoritarian, but because it disrupted the status quo. From civilians who preferred the Joker's chaos to Superman's control because at least chaos was familiar. "Then we make truth more comfortable than lies," he said. "Show them evidence. Give them alternatives. Demonstrate that accountability is possible." "With what institutional support?" Newman demanded. "Every judge is compromised. Every prosecutor has family Vought can threaten. Every journalist knows their career ends if they publish truth. You're talking about systemic change in a system designed to resist change." "I've changed systems before," Clark said quietly. "By becoming a dictator," Newman said, and Clark's eyes widened. "Yeah, I know about that." Vaught's intelligence division found references to regime Superman in classified multiverse research. Dimensional barriers aren't as solid as people think. You conquered your Earth through absolute force, And now you're here trying to convince yourself you can fight authoritarianism without becoming authoritarian. She stood, moving away from the desk and the useless pistol. Here's the truth, Superman. You're facing the same choice you faced on your Earth. Either impose your will through force, become the tyrant who saves people against their consent, or accept that this world will continue exactly as it is because humans are too corrupt and weak to save themselves. That's a false choice, Clark said. Is it? Newman pulled up her sleeve, revealing track marks, injection sites. I'm a soup. Compound V administered when I was an infant. I have powers I hide from Vought, abilities they don't know about. Because the moment they discover them, I become controllable. Vought thinks I'm human. Mallory thinks I'm human. Everyone thinks I'm human. And that's the only reason I'm still alive to fight them. She let the sleeve drop. My daughter Zoe, she's not enhanced. I made sure of that. Refused every pressure to inject her. And because of that choice, Vought holds her life over me constantly. Cooperate or Zoe disappears. Vote our way or accidents happen. Every single day, I make deals with monsters to keep my daughter alive. So don't lecture me about moral lines and proper resistance. I'm doing what survivors do, compromising, adapting, staying alive long enough to strike when opportunity appears. Clark understood then. Newman wasn't a hero or villain. She was a parent in an impossible situation, making impossible choices, hating herself for every compromise while convincing herself it served larger purpose. He'd been that person, after Lois died, when rage and grief twisted every decision. I can protect her, Clark said quietly. Your daughter. If you help me expose Vought, I'll make sure Zoe stays safe. You can't be everywhere, Newman said. That's the problem with one-person solutions. You're powerful, but there are millions of people Vought can hurt. You save one, they kill 10. You protect my daughter, they murder Mallory. You guard Mallory, they eliminate my intelligence network. It's a math problem you can't solve through individual intervention. Then we solve it systemically, Clark said. Use your position, hold hearings, subpoena Vought executives, force them into legal framework where they own the legal framework, Newman interrupted. Every judge who'd hear the case, every senator who'd vote on legislation. I hold hearings, they're theater. I subpoena executives, they claim privilege. The system isn't broken, Superman. It's working exactly as designed, to protect power at the expense of everyone else. It was the argument for the regime, the reason Clark had dismantled democracy on his Earth. Because systems designed by the corrupt would always serve corruption. So what's your solution? He asked. Newman moved to the window, looking out over Manhattan's glittering skyline. Mallory's building something, network of ex-CIA, military operators, people with skills and resources to fight Vought outside legal channels. We feed her intelligence, she positions assets, and eventually, when the moment is right, we strike. Cut off Vaught's head, expose everything simultaneously, create chaos in their power structure before they can respond. How many people die while you wait for the right moment? Clark asked. Newman turned to face him. Fewer than would die in open war. You want to fight Vought directly? They'll deploy military assets, call in government contracts, frame you as terrorist and justify using weapons that could level city blocks? The collateral damage would be catastrophic. I'm fast enough to prevent that. Are you fast enough to stop a nuclear weapon? Newman asked. Because that's Vaught's final contingency. Edgar confirmed it in classified briefing. If soups ever become uncontrollable threat, there are protocols. Tactical nukes positioned in major cities, authorized for deployment against extra-normal targets. Clark felt something cold settle in his chest. They'd nuke their own cities to stop me? They'd nuke anything to maintain control, Newman said. Power doesn't care about casualties. It cares about maintaining itself. You push too hard, they'll sacrifice millions to eliminate you and blame you for forcing their hand. It was Lex Luthor's logic, Amanda Waller's calculus. Every authoritarian system's final argument? Resist and we'll kill everyone, making you responsible for the deaths. The regime had used similar tactics, orbital weapons targeting resistance cells, threatening entire cities if heroes didn't surrender. Clark had justified it as necessary deterrence. Now he was on the receiving end. Then we make sure they can't deploy those weapons, he said. I locate the nukes, disable them, remove that threat from, and they deploy chemical weapons, or biological agents, or weaponized compound V strains that turn entire populations into controllable soups, or they crash the economy and blame you for the resulting deaths. Edgar's not stupid, Superman. He's planned for everything. She crossed her arms. The only way to beat Vought is their own method, systematic corruption replacement. We don't destroy the machine. We infiltrate it, compromise it from within, turn their own infrastructure against them. It takes time, it takes patience, and it requires accepting that people will suffer while we work. Clark had stood in this exact conversation on his Earth. Diana arguing for systematic change, Bruce demanding patience, every reasonable voice telling him that immediate action would cause more harm than good. And he'd ignored them all, imposed his will, became the regime. How long, he asked quietly. How long until Mallory's network is ready? Until your infiltration reaches critical mass? Until we can strike without catastrophic casualties? Years, Newman admitted, maybe decades. This is generational work. Decades, Clark repeated, while Homelander kills, while the Deep rapes, while children are injected with Compound V, while we build actual victory instead of symbolic gesture, Newman interrupted. You want to be the hero who saved this world? Then do the hard thing. Be patient. Work within systems instead of smashing them. Let those of us who've been fighting this fight for years actually... A scream cut through the night. Clark's head snapped toward the sound, super hearing triangulating instantly. Female, young, 8 blocks north. Chemical signature nearby. Compound Vi enhanced. Another assault beginning. I have to, he started. That's bait, Newman said immediately. Vought knows your weakness. They're staging incidents to draw you out, make you visible, give them targeting opportunities. I don't care, Clark said. Someone's in danger, and saving her puts hundreds of others at risk. Edgar's using these incidents to position assets, track your patterns, build countermeasures. Every intervention teaches them how to fight you. The scream intensified. Clark could hear crying now, pleading, his fists clenched. I'm not going to ignore someone suffering because it might be inconvenient for your long-term strategy, he said. Then you're going to get people killed, Newman said. But I suppose that's familiar territory for you, isn't it? Regime Superman? Clark looked at her, at the cynicism, the calculated compromise, the belief that patience and infiltration would somehow defeat systematic evil. She'd convinced herself that working within Vought's framework was resistance instead of collaboration. Maybe she was right. Maybe his impulse to act immediately, to save people now instead of strategically later, was just the regime mindset wearing different clothes. Or maybe waiting while people suffered was its own form of tyranny. I won't become what I was, Clark said, but I won't ignore suffering either. There has to be a path between patience and immediate action, between systematic change and individual rescue. There isn't, Newman said flatly. That's the lesson of this world. You choose power or principle, effectiveness or morality, survival or heroism. There's no middle ground. Another scream, more desperate, younger, maybe a child. Watch me find one, Superman said, and phased through the window. He was gone before Newman could respond, accelerating toward the scream while his mind raced with calculations. How to save this person without falling into Vought's trap. How to fight evil without becoming it. How to be the hero instead of the tyrant. Behind him, Victoria Newman watched him disappear into the night, then picked up her phone. Mallory, she said, Superman just left. He's going for the bait. Yes, I tried to warn him. He didn't listen. No, I don't think he can be controlled. He's too powerful, too principled, and too traumatized by whatever he did on his Earth. He's going to force the confrontation whether we're ready or not. She paused, listening. What do? We prepare for war, because Superman's about to give Vought exactly the excuse they need to deploy everything. The scream led to an alley behind a nightclub in Hell's Kitchen. Clark arrived to find a teenage girl, 16, maybe 17, pinned against a dumpster by a soup he didn't recognize. Mid-30s, athletic build, Vought costume variant suggesting B-list team affiliation. The soup's hand was around the girl's throat. His other hand was tearing at her clothing. Clark was behind him in less than a second, hand clamping on the soup's shoulder with enough pressure to crack bone. "Let her go!" The soup released the girl and spun, fist already swinging. Enhanced strength, maybe Mach 2 punch velocity. It connected with Clark's jaw and accomplished exactly nothing. The soup's hand shattered, multiple fractures, tendons snapping from the impact against invulnerable skin. He screamed and staggered back, cradling his destroyed hand. The girl collapsed against the dumpster, hyperventilating. Clark moved to check on her, and that's when he felt it, the prickle of laser targeting on his back. Multiple points, sniper positions on surrounding rooftops. Newman had been right. This was bait. "You okay?" he asked the girl gently, positioning himself between her and the sniper positions. She nodded frantically, tears streaming. He just grabbed me. I was walking home from work and..." "You're safe now," Clark said. "Can you stand?" She tried, legs shaking. Clark steadied her carefully, aware that every movement was being recorded, analyzed, weaponized. The soup with the shattered hand was backing away, and Clark's super hearing caught the subvocal communication. Earpiece transmissions coordinating with remote operators. "Target engaged," the soup whispered. "Position confirmed. Civilian present for collateral risk assessment." Clark's eyes blazed red. "You're not a predator, you're bait." The soup's expression shifted from pain to something like vindication. "Vought sends its regards." The rooftops erupted, not bullets. Clark had expected bullets. These were specialized rounds, probably developed specifically for him. High-velocity tungsten penetrators wrapped in some kind of energy field that made his skin actually register impact. Not painful, but noticeable. They'd studied his interventions, calculated his durability, engineered countermeasures. Clark moved faster than human eyes could track, scooping up the girl and placing her behind a reinforced concrete support pillar in 0.3 seconds. Then he was airborne, accelerating toward the nearest sniper position. The sniper didn't even try to run, just pulled a detonator and pressed it. The building exploded, not the whole structure, shaped charges designed to collapse specific support beams, bringing 3 floors down on top of Clark as he approached. Tons of concrete and steel crashing down with calculated precision. Clark punched through the debris, emerging unharmed but now covered in dust. Around him, the other buildings were evacuating. Pre-positioned civilians flooding into streets, cameras capturing their panic, creating the exact image Vogt wanted. Superman causing chaos and destruction. This was Metropolis all over again. The Joker's trap, Lois's death. Everything designed to force Clark into impossible choices where everyone lost. "Clever," he said, voice carrying across the rooftops through sheer volume. "Stage an assault, position me as savior, then detonate infrastructure and blame me for casualties." Edgar's playbook is predictable. A voice boomed from loudspeakers positioned throughout the neighborhood. Stan Edgar's measured tone. "Superman, you are currently operating in violation of multiple federal laws. Stand down immediately or face lethal countermeasures." "Where are the casualties?" Clark demanded. "The girl was bait. The buildings were pre-evacuated. This is theater designed to justify killing me." "Incorrect," Edgar's voice responded. "This is consequence. You've positioned yourself as vigilante operating above law and accountability. When such individuals become threats to public safety, government has obligation to respond. You're being given opportunity to surrender peacefully. Take it." Clark's X-ray vision swept the area. No actual civilians in immediate danger. They'd been cleared systematically, probably hours ago. Professional evacuation disguised as panic. But his super hearing picked up something else. Heartbeats. Real ones. Elevated stress. Genuine fear. There, in the building 2 blocks east, 3rd floor, dozen signatures, bound and gagged based on the muffled breathing. Hostages? No. Insurance. Vought ensuring Clark couldn't simply leave without looking like he'd abandoned people. "The hostages in the Gramercy building," Clark said clearly. "Release them." "What hostages?" Edgar's voice held carefully modulated confusion. "Superman, you're experiencing paranoid delusions. There are no hostages. Please surrender before your mental instability forces us to. Clark was already moving, crossing 2 blocks in under a second. He phased through the Gramercy building's wall and found exactly what his senses had detected. 12 people zip-tied to chairs, hoods over their heads, industrial explosives wired throughout the room on dead man switches. Sarah Chen was among them, the paralegal he'd protected. Vought had grabbed her from the boy's safe house. "Persistent, aren't you?" Clark said to whoever was listening through the surveillance equipment he could see embedded in the walls. "Hostages wired with explosives. Kill me or I trigger the charges. Standard terrorist playbook." He moved through the room at super speed, his hands a blur. Zip ties cut with heat vision, precise enough to sever plastic without burning skin. Hoods removed, explosives disabled by freezing the detonation mechanisms with controlled freeze breath. All 12 people freed in 4.7 seconds. Sarah stared at him, hood removed, explosives frozen solid. "They grabbed me 3 hours ago. Butcher tried to fight them, but they had some kind of power-nullifying tech for Kimiko and—" "Are you hurt?" Clark interrupted. "No, terrified but not hurt." She looked at the other hostages, journalists, activists, people Vought had identified as enemies. "They said we were leverage, that you'd have to choose between saving us and stopping them from—" The explosion cut her off. "Not here. This building was secure." But Clark's super hearing caught it, triangulated it, identified it with horrible certainty. The boy's safe house. Detonation signature consistent with military-grade explosives. Multiple buildings collapsing, fires spreading, and screaming. So much screaming. Clark's world narrowed to a single calculation. The hostages here were safe. He could leave them, respond to the explosion, save whoever was trapped in the collapse. Or he could stay, ensure these 12 definitely survived, and accept that others might die. Impossible choice. Joker's logic. Forcing the hero to pick who lives. "Go," Sarah said, reading his expression. "We're safe. They need you more." Clark was gone before she finished speaking. Sonic boom shattering windows as he accelerated toward the explosion site. He covered the distance in 3 seconds and found hell in full bloom. 3 buildings collapsed, fires raging through the wreckage, people trapped under debris, screaming for help, emergency responders just arriving, nowhere near equipped to handle this scale of disaster. And standing in the middle of it, cameras positioned for optimal coverage, was Homelander. "Superman," he called out, voice carrying with theatrical projection. "Thank God you're here, some kind of terrorist attack. We need to work together to save these people." The performance was flawless. Homelander playing the hero, concerned and determined, ready to rescue civilians alongside his new ally. Cameras capturing everything, already streaming live to millions. Clark's X-ray vision swept the wreckage. 47 people trapped, 19 critically injured, 4 already dead from the initial collapse, and buried deepest, nearly crushed under a collapsed stairwell. Billy Butcher, unconscious and bleeding, pinned by steel beam across his chest. "The boys were in there," Clark said, voice flat. "This was their safe house. You knew exactly where to strike." Homelander's expression showed perfect confusion. "What? No, this was Superman. I don't know what you're talking about. We detected terrorist activity in this location, moved to investigate, and the whole building just exploded. We need to focus on rescue, not—" "Stop lying," Clark said. "I can hear your heartbeat. You're not stressed, not surprised. This was planned." Homelander's mask slipped for just a moment, that cold, vast thing behind his eyes showing through. Then the hero face returned. "Wow, okay. You're clearly experiencing some kind of paranoid episode. But that's fine, we can work through that later. Right now, people are dying. Are you going to help them, or are you going to stand there accusing heroes of terrorism?" It was perfect. Textbook manipulation. Forced Clark to either abandon the accusation to save people, or continue challenging Homelander while civilians died. Either way, Vought won. Superman either looked paranoid or negligent. Clark made his choice in milliseconds. He moved, not toward the hostages, not toward Homelander, toward every camera in the area. Super speed allowed him to reach each recording device, news cameras, phones, security feeds, faster than operators could track. At each one, he stopped for exactly 0.07 seconds and spoke directly into the lens. "I'm Superman. Vought just detonated 3 buildings to create a rescue scenario that forces me to cooperate with Homelander or look negligent. They're manipulating this crisis for propaganda. But I'm not going to debate it while people die. I'm going to save everyone in this wreckage. And then I'm going to expose Vought's crimes systematically. Watch what happens next." 17 cameras, 17 identical messages delivered in 1.19 seconds. Then he was in the rubble, moving faster than human perception, pulling people from collapsed sections with precision that prevented further injuries. First victim, woman trapped under concrete slab. Clark lifted the slab, pulled her free, checked for spinal damage with X-ray vision, stabilized her neck, delivered her to paramedics. 2.4 seconds. Second victim, man impaled by rebar. Clark used heat vision to cut the metal, freeze breath to prevent bleeding, super speed extraction to minimize trauma. 3.01 seconds. Third, fourth, fifth. He moved through the wreckage like a ghost, appearing wherever the need was greatest, each rescue executed with surgical precision. His Kryptonian biology allowed him to multitask in ways humans couldn't. X-ray vision tracking all trapped victims simultaneously. Super hearing monitoring heartbeats and breathing. Super speed allowing parallel rescues. Homelander tried to help, genuinely tried, lifting debris and pulling people free. But he was slower, less precise, and his showboating created additional collapses that Clark had to prevent. After the third time Homelander's rescue nearly killed someone, Clark moved him aside with gentle but irresistible force. "You're making it worse," Clark said. "Let me work." "I'm trying to help," Homelander protested, and for once it might have been genuine. Whatever else he was, Homelander desperately needed to be seen as heroic. Failing at rescue in front of cameras was his worst nightmare. "Then help by clearing civilians from the perimeter," Clark said. "Make sure no one else gets hurt by secondary collapses." Homelander's jaw tightened, but he complied, probably because it gave him something heroic to do on camera. Clark continued the rescues. 47 people trapped. He extracted all of them in 6 minutes and 32 seconds. 43 survived. 4 had been dead before he arrived, killed by the initial blast. The last rescue was Billy Butcher. Clark found him 3 stories down, pinned under structural steel, internal bleeding severe enough that moving him incorrectly would be fatal. He was barely conscious, eyes fluttering. "Butcher," Clark said quietly, X-ray vision assessing damage. Crushed ribs, punctured lung, liver laceration, internal bleeding in at least 3 locations. "Stay still, I'm getting you out." "Fucking told you," Butcher coughed blood. "Told you they'd come at you." "You were right," Clark admitted. He used heat vision to cut the steel beam with precision that left Butcher unburned, then lifted him with impossible gentleness. "You were right about a lot of things, but you were wrong about one." "What's that?" "You thought the only way to fight them was becoming like them. Killing, compromising, accepting that darkness was necessary." Clark began ascending through the collapsed floors, moving carefully to prevent jostling Butcher's injuries. "But I just saved 43 people while Vought tried to force me into choosing between rescue and justice. I did both, without killing anyone, without becoming the tyrant." 43? Butcher's laugh turned into another bloody cough. "How many dead?" 4, Clark said quietly. 4 people I couldn't save because they died in the initial blast. 4 people dead because you didn't kill Homelander when you had the chance. The accusation hit harder than any of Vault's weapons, because it was true. If Clark had executed Homelander at Vault Tower, these buildings wouldn't have been detonated. The boys' safe house wouldn't have been bombed. 4 people would still be alive. "I know," Clark said. "I know what my principles cost, but I also know what abandoning them costs. I've lived that cost, ruled a planet built on that compromise, and it was worse. So much worse He emerged from the wreckage carrying Butcher, and the cameras captured it all. Superman, covered in dust and blood that wasn't his own, holding a dying vigilante with infinite gentleness while emergency responders rushed forward. Homelander stood at the perimeter, watching. His expression was complex: frustration at being upstaged, confusion at Clark's effectiveness, and something else. Something that might have been envy. "Medics," Clark called. "This man needs immediate surgical intervention. Punctured lung, liver laceration, multiple internal bleeds. Stabilize him for transport." The paramedics took Butcher, loading him onto a gurney with practiced efficiency. As they worked, Butcher grabbed Clark's cape weakly, pulled him close. "The others," he whispered. Frenchie, Huey, Kimiko. "All accounted for," Clark said, having tracked their heartbeats throughout the rescue. "MM has a broken arm. Frenchie has a concussion. Huey's fine. He wasn't in the building. Kimiko's already healing. You took the worst of it." "Lucky me." Butcher's eyes were closing. "Hey, Superman, save your strength. Fuck, that need to tell you." His grip tightened on the cape. "You were right about not killing. If you'd killed Homelander, I'd have asked you to kill the next one, and the next would have used you as executioner, turned you into the monster. You're afraid of becoming." Clark's throat tightened. "Rest now. We'll talk when you're healed. One more thing." Butcher's eyes opened slightly. "That girl you saved in the alley, also bait, but also real. Vaught's using real crimes as trap. They're not faking the assaults, just weaponizing them." The paramedics were wheeling Butcher away. Clark stepped back, letting them work, and turned to survey the disaster site. 3 buildings destroyed, 4 people dead, dozens injured, all because Vought needed to create circumstances that would break him, corrupt him, or eliminate him. And they'd almost succeeded. If he'd chosen to chase Homelander instead of saving the hostages, people would have died. If he'd stayed with the hostages instead of responding to the explosion, different people would have died. If he'd taken the time to confront Vaught's deception instead of focusing on rescue, everyone would have died. Impossible choices. Joker's mathematics, the calculus of suffering designed to prove that heroism was futile. But he'd saved 43 people, while refusing to become the tyrant, while maintaining the line he'd drawn. The question was, could he keep doing it? Could he win this war without crossing the lines that had defined the regime? "That was impressive," Homelander said, approaching from the perimeter. The cameras were still rolling, capturing their interaction. "Seriously, that rescue operation was... I've done a lot of saves, but that was fast. Efficient. You barely made any mistakes." "I made 4, Clark said quietly. 4 people are dead." "Yeah, but that's pretty good for an explosion this size. Most heroes would have lost way more. You should feel good about..." "I don't feel good about any of this," Clark interrupted. He looked directly at Homelander, past the cameras and performance and corporate training. "Vought created this disaster. They grabbed hostages, planted explosives, detonated infrastructure, all to force me into a scenario where I'd either compromise my principles or look negligent. And you're complicit. You knew this was coming." Homelander's expressions cycled through emotions too quickly to track. Denial, anger, fear, that vast, empty thing behind his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about. I responded to a crisis. I tried to help. I'm a hero." "You're a weapon," Clark said. "Vaught's weapon, and they're using you to destroy anything that threatens their control." "I'm not a weapon," Homelander's voice rose. I'm the Homelander. I'm the world's greatest hero. I've saved thousands of people. Tens of thousands. I've stopped terrorists and criminals and murdered civilians," Clark said, "and threatened innocents, and served corporate interests while calling it heroism." The cameras were capturing everything, every word, every expression, millions of people watching this confrontation live. Homelander seemed to realize it simultaneously. His face shifted, the mask returning. You're delusional. You're experiencing some kind of break from reality. I understand. You're new to this world, probably overwhelmed by the scale of heroism required here. But accusing fellow heroes of conspiracy isn't helping anyone. You're right, Clark said. Accusations don't help. Evidence does. He rose into the air, cape billowing. I have video documentation of your crimes, Homelander. Audio confessions. Physical evidence. Within 72 hours, every news outlet on Earth will receive complete files. Independently verified, impossible to suppress. The world will know what you are. They'll never air it, Homelander said, but his confidence wavered. Vought controls the narrative. We always have. You controlled the narrative because nobody challenged it with indisputable proof, Clark said. That ends now. He accelerated into the sky, leaving Homelander standing in the rubble, cameras still recording his stunned expression. Behind him, the disaster site teemed with emergency responders, saving lives Clark had rescued from Vaught's trap. And in hospitals across New York, Sarah Chen, the boys, and 43 other survivors began telling anyone who'd listen about what had really happened. The war was beginning. The evidence release happened at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Not through traditional media, Clark had learned that lesson. Instead, he'd spent the previous 48 hours establishing his own infrastructure, flying to newsrooms across 6 continents, meeting with investigative journalists who'd been silenced, threatened, or bought off by Vought, delivering encrypted drives containing everything he'd gathered, video of Homelander murdering the photographer, audio of A-Train discussing drug trafficking, Black Noir's burial sites with GPS coordinates, the Deep's assaults with timestamps and victim testimony, financial records showing systematic bribery, compound Vi testing on infants. Every crime documented with evidence that even Vaught's lawyers couldn't dismiss as fabrication. But Clark added one more element. He appeared personally. At 3:47 a.m. Eastern, he materialized on live broadcasts across the world. Not physically, he couldn't be in every studio simultaneously, but through pre-recorded message delivered to outlets that had agreed to air it. BBC, Al Jazeera, Deutsche Welle, NHK, CBC, hundreds of independent networks Vought didn't control. The message was simple. My name is Kal-El. You know me as Superman. I'm not from your Earth. I arrived here from another dimension where I made mistakes I'm trying not to repeat. In my world, I became a tyrant because I convinced myself that absolute power was necessary to maintain order. I killed people who opposed me, imprisoned heroes who challenged me, ruled through fear disguised as protection. He paused, letting that settle. I'm telling you this because you need to understand. I know what corruption looks like. I know how power justifies itself. And I'm looking at Vought International with eyes that have seen this pattern before. The footage shifted. Homelander killing the photographer. The Deep cornering a woman. A-Train dealing compound Vi derivatives to teenagers. Black Noir's victims. Every crime playing in sequence. Undeniable and horrifying. These are your heroes. The people Vought markets as humanity's protectors. And this is what they do when they think nobody's watching. The evidence you're seeing has been verified by independent forensic analysts. The locations can be investigated. The victims can testify. This isn't fabrication, it's documentation. Clark's face returned to the screen. Vought will claim I'm lying. They'll say this is manipulation, that I'm a threat, that you should fear me instead of them. And maybe you should fear me. I have enough power to level cities. But I'm choosing not to. I'm choosing to give you information and let you decide what to do with it. That's the difference between a hero and a tyrant. He leaned closer to the camera. To the people of this world, you've been conditioned to worship soups because Vought controlled the narrative. They showed you the rescues, hid the rapes, marketed the murders as necessary force. But you deserve truth. You deserve heroes who actually protect instead of prey. And you deserve the power to hold enhanced individuals accountable. Another pause. I can't give you that power through force. That would make me the dictator again. But I can give you information. What you do with it determines whether this world changes or stays broken. I'm trusting humanity to be better than Vought believes you are. The message ended with a title card. VoughtLeaks.org, Full Evidence Archive. Within minutes, the website crashed from traffic overload. Clark had anticipated that. He distributed mirror sites across 30 different servers in countries Vote couldn't touch. The evidence spread like wildfire. Social media exploded. Traditional news networks scrambled to verify. Vaught's stock price began plummeting before markets officially opened. And in Vault Tower, Stan Edgar watched the world burn. "Damage assessment," Edgar said, voice calm despite the disaster unfolding across every screen in the Situation Room. Madeline Stillwell pulled up projections. Stock down 18% in pre-market, Senate Oversight Committee calling emergency session, Interpol issuing arrest warrants for the 7 members, Twitter trending with gut-shouting Vought leaks for 6 hours straight. We're estimating 72% of global population will see this evidence within 24 hours. Can we suppress it? Edgar asked. No, Stillwell said flatly. Superman distributed through platforms we don't control, in jurisdictions we can't influence. China's already blocked it, but Europe, Africa, South America, they're running it everywhere. Even our American outlets are being forced to cover it because their international partners are. Edgar nodded slowly. Then we adapt. Activate protocol Scorched Earth. Stillwell's composure cracked. Stan, we can't. The collateral damage would be necessary, Edgar interrupted. Superman has positioned himself as humanity's champion, trusting them to act on information. We demonstrate why that trust is misplaced. Show the world what happens when they believe in heroes instead of systems. He turned to Ashley Barrett, Vought's Director of Talent Relations, who looked on the verge of panic. Ashley, you're going to hold a press conference in 2 hours. You're going to admit that some of our heroes have exhibited problematic behavior. You're going to announce immediate reforms, independent oversight, new standards. You're going to cry on camera about how disappointed we are. But the evidence, Ashley started. The evidence proves we need reform, not dissolution, Edgar said. We don't deny crimes. We acknowledge them, apologize profusely, and position Vought as the only organization capable of managing suit behavior. Without us, imagine the chaos. Make them fear unregulated soups more than they fear Vought. He pulled up schematics on the main screen, maps of major cities, marked with red indicators. And while you're generating sympathy, we activate the contingencies, compound V distribution to criminal organizations, strategic releases of unstable soups into population centers, orchestrated chaos that proves humanity needs Vaught's control. You're going to create disasters to prove we're necessary? Stillwell said slowly. I'm going to demonstrate reality, Edgar corrected. Superman believes humans will use information wisely. We'll prove they won't. We'll show them collapsing into panic, demanding the safety only Vought provides. We'll make them beg us to take control again. Stillwell looked sick. How many casualties? Acceptable levels, Edgar said. Enough to create fear, not enough to trigger international intervention. We've modeled this extensively. Riots in 12 major cities, property damage in the billions, approximately 2,000 deaths spread across 3 weeks, all traceable to unregulated soups operating without Vought oversight. 2,000 people, Stillwell repeated, compared to the millions who benefit from Vaught's infrastructure, Edgar said. It's mathematics, Madeline. Cold, necessary mathematics. He turned to the tactical board. Deploy assets, priority targets, Superman's allies. The boys are already neutralized. Butchers in critical care, injured, their infrastructure destroyed. But there are others. Journalists who received evidence, whistleblowers, anyone who could build on Superman's momentum. Eliminate them quietly. Make it look like accidents. And Superman himself, Stillwell asked. We can't kill him. He's proven too durable. But we can isolate him, turn public opinion. He admitted to being a tyrant on his Earth. We emphasize that. Build narrative that he's dangerous, unstable, trying to control our world like he controlled his. Every disaster we create, we hint Superman's interference destabilize the system. Make them fear him more than they fear us. Ashley was typing furiously. I'll need talking points for the press conference. How do we address specific crimes? The Deep's assaults are documented. Homelander's murders are on video. Black Noir's victims can be exhumed. We acknowledge everything, Edgar said. Full confession. The 7 are placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We announce formation of independent oversight board, which will staff with our people, but the public won't know that for months. We position VOT as responsibly addressing systemic issues while warning about the dangers of Superman-style vigilante justice. He pulled up footage of last night's disaster site. We also have this: Superman causing building collapses during rescue operations. We edit it properly, emphasize the 4 casualties, question his methods. Yes, our heroes were flawed, but at least they operated within systems. Superman just smashes through everything, leaving corpses and rubble. Stillwell nodded slowly, political instincts taking over. We pivot from defending the 7 to defending institutional control. Make it about regulation versus chaos. Exactly, Edgar said. And we accelerate Phase 3. Phase 3 isn't ready, Stillwell warned. We're at least 2 years from viable deployment. Then compress the timeline, Edgar said. I want operational soups under full control within 6 months. Neurological compliance chips, behavioral conditioning, the complete package. If Superman wants to prove heroes can exist, we'll create actual heroes, ones we control completely. Show the world that only through VOT's management can soups be trusted. He looked at the assembled executives. Gentlemen, ladies, we're facing the most significant threat to our organization's existence. But threats create opportunities. When this is over, VOT will be stronger than ever, and Superman will be a cautionary tale about why the world needs us. And if Superman stops our operations, someone asked. If he's fast enough to prevent the chaos, strong enough to protect people despite our interference? Edgar smiled thinly. Then we deploy the nuclear option, literally if necessary. But I suspect Superman's principles will prevent him from being everywhere simultaneously. He can save some people. We'll make sure he can't save everyone, and the failure will break him. Clark heard the strategy session from 30,000 feet. He was hovering above Vote Tower, super hearing tuned to Edgar's voice, listening to every word. The plan to create chaos, the 2,000 projected casualties, the systematic elimination of his allies. His fists clenched. Heat vision flickered at the edges of his vision. One attack, one precision strike through Vote Tower's roof, directly into the Situation Room. He could end Edgar, Stillwell, the entire executive board before they could implement any of it. Remove the head of the snake, save 2,000 lives through preemptive action. The regime had operated on exactly this logic. Identify threats, eliminate them before they could act. Justify it as preventing greater harm. Clark's hand trembled as he calculated the strike. He could do it. Should do it. 2,000 innocent lives versus a handful of corporate sociopaths. The mathematics was simple, but if he killed them, what stopped him from killing the next threat? And the next? When did preemptive execution become tyranny wearing heroism's mask? His super hearing expanded beyond the tower, sweeping across New York. In hospitals, Butcher was undergoing surgery, doctors working desperately to save him from injuries Vought had inflicted. In safe houses, journalists were being hunted by Vought's assets. In homes across the city, people were reading the leaked evidence and making choices about what it meant. Clark descended slowly, landing on Voght Tower's roof. His footsteps were silent despite his weight, Kryptonian control allowing precision movement. He could hear Edgar's heartbeat through 78 floors of steel and concrete. Steady, calm, convinced he was making the right choice. Just like Clark had been convinced when he built the regime. I know you're listening, Clark said quietly, knowing his voice would carry through the building. I know you heard me land. I know you're waiting to see if I'll kill you. Edgar's heartbeat spiked, just slightly. Fear, carefully controlled. Here's what's going to happen, Clark continued. I'm going to stop every disaster you create, prevent every assassination you order, protect every person you target, not through preemptive killing, but through constant vigilance. I will be everywhere your people operate. I will document everything they do, and I will ensure that every crime you commit is exposed publicly, immediately, undeniably. He paused. You're counting on me being unable to save everyone. You're right, I can't, but I can save enough that your strategy fails. And every person I save, every disaster I prevent, Every truth I expose will prove that accountability is possible, that heroes can exist without corporate control, that power doesn't have to corrupt. Another pause. I'm giving you one chance, Edgar. Cancel Protocol Scorched Earth, surrender to authorities, face justice for your crimes, or continue and discover exactly how much I can accomplish without killing anyone. He rose back into the air, cape billowing. Choose wisely, because unlike you, I actually believe humanity deserves the chance to hold you accountable. But if you force me to become the dictator I was on my Earth, if you create circumstances where only absolute control can prevent mass casualties, I'll accept that cost. I'll become the tyrant again, and this time, there's no Justice League to stop me. He accelerated into the sky, leaving the threat hanging. Inside Vought Tower, Edgar sat very still for a long moment. Then he spoke. Continue with Protocol Scorched Earth. Full deployment. Superman's made his choice. He's trusting humanity over power. We'll prove that's the wrong choice. The chaos began 6 hours later. Simultaneous riots in 12 cities. Unstable soups released into population centers. Compound buy distributed to criminal organizations, creating new enhanced threats. Infrastructure failures blamed on Superman's interference. And Clark was everywhere. London, a Vought asset, released a chemically enhanced psychopath into Piccadilly Circus. Clark intercepted him before he reached the crowd, disabled him with surgical precision, delivered him to authorities with full documentation of Vought's involvement. New York, 3 soups attacked a subway station during rush hour. Clark evacuated 847 people in 4.2 seconds, neutralized the attackers without killing them, and traced their coordination back to Vought tactical teams. Tokyo, infrastructure sabotage designed to collapse a bridge during traffic peak. Clark held the bridge together with his body, while engineers evacuated the structure, then rebuilt support beams using salvaged materials at superspeed. Paris, Mumbai, São Paulo, Berlin, everywhere Vought created chaos, Superman appeared to prevent it. Not through overwhelming violence, but through speed, precision, and absolute refusal to kill. But he couldn't be everywhere. In Sydney, a Vought-orchestrated bombing killed 37 people before Clark arrived. In Cairo, enhanced criminals murdered 14 during a bank robbery that should have been preventable. In Mexico City, infrastructure failure he couldn't reach in time caused a building collapse that claimed 42 lives. Each death was documented, each failure weaponized in Vought's propaganda. Superman can't save everyone. Systems are necessary. Vought's control prevents more deaths than it causes. For 72 hours, Clark didn't sleep. Kryptonian biology allowed it. Solar energy sustained him indefinitely. He moved between crisis points, saving hundreds, losing dozens, and watching the mathematics of suffering that Edgar had predicted. 2,000 projected casualties. They were approaching 400. On the third night, exhausted in ways that had nothing to do with physical fatigue, Clark landed on the roof of Metro General Hospital where Butcher was recovering. He sat on the edge, cape hanging over the side, and listened to the city. So much pain, so much fear, and underneath it, the quiet satisfaction in Vought executives' voices as they tracked Superman's failure rate. "You look like shit," a voice said behind him. Clark turned. Billy Butcher stood in the rooftop doorway, hospital gown and IV stand. He shouldn't have been out of bed. Surgery 3 days ago, injuries that would have killed a normal person. "You should be resting," Clark said. "Yeah, well, hard to rest when the world's ending and Superman's having an existential crisis on my hospital's roof." Butcher shuffled over, dragging his IV stand, and sat down next to Clark with a pained grunt. "How many you saved?" 3,647, Clark said quietly. "How many died?" 412. Butcher whistled. "Better ratio than expected, honestly. Edgar projected 2,000. You've cut his numbers by 80%. 412 people are still dead," Clark said. "People I could have saved if I'd just killed Edgar when I had the chance. If I'd taken control instead of trusting humanity to what? Rise up against Vought? Hold them accountable?" Butcher laughed bitterly. "Mate, I've been trying to get humans to give a shit about soup crimes for 8 years. You know what I learned? They don't care. They really genuinely don't care. As long as the trains run and the soups look pretty, they'll ignore any amount of suffering. The evidence is spreading, Clark said. People are seeing the truth. And they're terrified, Butcher interrupted. Yeah, they believe Homelander's a monster, but they're also watching what happens when there's no system controlling him. Riots, chaos, buildings collapsing. Your evidence didn't liberate them. It scared them. And scared people don't choose freedom. They choose safety. Clark's jaw tightened. So I should have killed Edgar. Impose control. Become the dictator. No, Butcher said quietly. You should accept that you can't save everyone. That some people will die no matter what you do. And that trying to prevent all suffering by taking absolute control is just another form of suffering. Clark looked at him. You're the one who wanted me to kill them all. Yeah, well, Butcher coughed, pain crossing his face. Turns out getting blown up gives you time to think. And I realized something while I was lying under that steel beam, bleeding out, waiting for either you or death. You were right about the killing. If you'd executed Homelander at Vault Tower, I would have asked you to kill the next one. And the next, I would have turned you into my personal executioner, and when you were done killing all the soups I hated, I would have hated you too. Because that's what people do with weapons. We use them until we fear them. He lit a cigarette despite the hospital setting. You can't win this by being stronger or faster or more ruthless than Vought. They've got infinite resources and zero conscience. You can only win by being what they're not, someone who actually gives a shit about people, even when it costs you. It's costing 412 lives, Clark said. No, Butcher corrected. Vaught's costing those lives. You're just refusing to save them through tyranny. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the city sprawl beneath them. What happens if I can't stop them? Clark asked quietly. If the death toll reaches 2,000, if humanity chooses Vaught's safety over freedom, if everything I'm doing just proves that heroes can't exist in this world? Butcher took a long drag on his cigarette. Then you leave. Go back to your dimension, find some other world to save, let us burn in the bed we made. But he looked at Clark directly. You don't impose order because we're too weak to save ourselves. Because that's not heroism. That's just another flavor of what Vought does. Clark felt something crack inside him. Not break. He'd been broken since Lois died, but cracked differently. Fracture lines forming along new boundaries. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted. Watch people die. Accept my limitations. Trust humanity despite evidence they'll choose wrong. Yeah, Butcher said. That's the hard part of being a hero instead of a god. Gods get to decide. Heroes have to trust. An alarm screamed across the city, another Vought operation beginning. Clark's super hearing triangulated it. Chemical plant explosion, deliberately triggered, toxic clouds spreading toward residential areas. Go, Butcher said. Save who you can, accept what you can't. Be the hero. Clark stood, cape billowing. What about you? I'm going to make some calls. Get our network activated. The boys aren't just me, mate. We've got people everywhere. Ex-CIA, military contractors, journalists, activists. While you're stopping the disasters, we'll be dismantling the infrastructure. Different fight, same war. Superman nodded and launched into the sky, sonic boom rattling hospital windows. Behind him, Billy Butcher watched him disappear, then pulled out his phone. Mallory, he said when she answered, it's time. Activate all assets. We're taking Vought apart piece by piece. What changed? Grace Mallory's voice asked. Butcher smiled grimly. I met an actual hero. Turns out they're useful. The war lasted 14 days. Not a war of armies or explosions, though Vought tried to make it that. A war of information, infrastructure, and ideology. Superman preventing disasters while the Boys Network dismantled Vought's power structure. Journalists publishing suppressed stories. Whistleblowers testifying to congressional committees. Activists organizing protests outside every Vought facility worldwide. And slowly, impossibly, the world began to change. Day 4. The Deep surrendered to authorities, confessing to multiple assaults in exchange for reduced sentencing. His testimony implicated Vaught's legal team in systematic cover-up. Day 6, A-Train's compound VI distribution network was exposed by Frenchie's investigation. 15 Vault executives arrested on trafficking charges. Day 8, Black Noir's burial sites were excavated. 17 bodies recovered. Vaught's knowledge of his activities proven through internal emails Huey had hacked. Day 10, Queen Maeve held an unauthorized press conference, describing years of abuse, forced relationships, and Vaught's psychological manipulation. Her testimony went viral. A hero breaking ranks inspired dozens of other soups to come forward. Day 12, Stan Edgar was arrested on charges of conspiracy, reckless endangerment, and crimes against humanity. He smiled for the cameras, confident his lawyers would have him released within hours. They didn't. The evidence was too comprehensive, too public, too undeniable. Day 14, Homelander disappeared. Clark found him at sunrise on day 15, floating above the Atlantic Ocean, miles from any landmass. Just hovering there, cape hanging limp, staring at the water below. "I wondered when you'd come," Homelander said without turning around. "Everyone else has abandoned me. Vaught's lawyers won't return my calls. The 7 are disbanded. Madeline's in custody. Even my fans are calling me a monster." He laughed, hollow, broken. "Guess they were right about me all along." Clark floated alongside him, maintaining distance. "You could surrender, face trial, accept consequences for what you've done, and spend life in prison?" Homelander turned and his eyes were red, not with heat vision, but with tears. "I'm Homelander. I'm supposed to be the hero, the best, the strongest. How did this happen? How did everything fall apart?" "You were never actually a hero," Clark said quietly. "You were a weapon that Vought marketed as a hero. There's a difference." "And you," Homelander demanded, "what are you? You admitted to being a tyrant on your Earth, to killing people, to ruling through fear. How are you different from me?" "I'm not," Clark said. "That's the point. I became exactly what you are. Someone who convinced himself that power justified anything, that strength meant I was right, that I was saving people by controlling them." He looked at Homelander directly. "The only difference is that I had people who stopped me. Batman, Wonder Woman, the insurgency. They fought me until I understood what I'd become. You never had that. You had Vought telling you that your worst impulses were justified. So it's not my fault?" Homelander's voice rose, desperate. "I'm just a victim of bad corporate management?" "You're responsible for your choices," Clark said. "But those choices were shaped by people who raised you as a weapon and then acted surprised when you behaved like one. You were failed by every adult who should have taught you that power requires restraint, that strength doesn't equal rightness, that being worshipped isn't the same as being loved." Homelander was silent for a long moment. Then, "I killed that photographer because he took a bad picture of me, just grabbed his head and crushed it because the angle made me look fat. Do you understand how insane that is? How trivial? And I didn't even feel bad about it. I felt annoyed that I had to hide the body." "I know," Clark said. "I killed the Joker because he murdered my wife. Then I killed others because they threatened my vision of order. Each time I felt righteous, convinced I was doing what was necessary. It wasn't until much later that I understood what I'd become." "How much later?" "Years," Clark admitted. "Too many years. Too many bodies." Homelander looked back at the ocean. "I don't know how to be anything except what I am. Vought made me into this, raised me in a lab, tested my limits, punished me when I showed weakness. They taught me that humans were beneath me, that I was superior, that I deserved worship," his voice cracked. "And I believed them. God help me, I believed them." "You can choose differently now," Clark said. "Turn yourself in. Testify against Vought. Help dismantle the system that created you. It won't undo your crimes, but it might prevent others from becoming what you became. And then what? Rot in a cell for the rest of eternity? I'm functionally immortal, Superman. Compound VI doesn't just give powers. It extends lifespan indefinitely. I could spend centuries in prison, alone with what I've done." "Yes," Clark said simply. "That's the cost of accountability." Homelander laughed again, and this time it was genuinely unhinged. "You know what the worst part is? I actually admire you. You're everything I was supposed to be. strong, principled, actually heroic. And you didn't need Vought to tell you how to be that. You just were. Even after becoming a tyrant, you found your way back to heroism. How? I didn't, Clark said. Not completely. I'm still finding my way. Every day. Every choice. I'm still terrified I'll become what I was. Still tempted to impose control when I see suffering I could prevent through force. The difference is that now I recognize the temptation and choose differently. What if I can't? Homelander asked quietly. What if I'm too broken, too corrupted by what they made me? Then you'll fail, Clark said. But failing while trying to be better is still more heroic than succeeding at being what you were. They floated there in silence, two figures in capes hovering above the Atlantic, while the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Finally, Homelander spoke. If I surrender, if I testify, if I try to help, will you promise me something? Depends on what it is. Promise me you'll make sure they don't create another me? That Vought's Compound V program gets shut down permanently, that no other kid gets raised in a lab and turned into a weapon. Homelander's voice was raw. I can't undo what I am, but maybe I can prevent the next version. Clark extended his hand. I promise. Homelander stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he took it. They descended together toward New York, toward the authorities waiting to arrest America's greatest hero for crimes that would define a generation. The trial lasted 6 months. Homelander testified for 47 hours across 12 days, detailing every crime, every cover-up, every systemic failure that had enabled his behavior. His confession was comprehensive, unflinching, and utterly damning for himself and for Vought. Other soups followed his lead. The Deep A Train, dozens of enhanced individuals who'd operated under Vought's protection, came forward with testimony that exposed the full scope of corporate criminality. Stan Edgar received life imprisonment without parole. Madeline Stillwell got 30 years. Ashley Barrett turned state's evidence and entered witness protection. The 7 were officially disbanded. Vought International's assets were seized, the Compound VD program terminated, and international regulations established for enhanced individuals. And through it all, Superman was there. Not imposing order, not executing justice, but bearing witness, protecting witnesses, ensuring trials proceeded fairly, becoming the symbol of what heroism could be when it served justice instead of corporate interests. But the victory was incomplete. 412 people had died during Vought's protocol, Scorched Earth. Another 83 died in the chaos that followed Vought's collapse. Power vacuums filled by criminals, desperate soups operating without corporate oversight, and the inevitable violence of systemic change. Clark attended every funeral, listened to every grieving family, accepted responsibility for the deaths his principles had allowed. You couldn't have saved them all, Annie January told him one evening, 6 months after the trials concluded. They were standing on the roof of what had been Vought Tower, now converted into a memorial for Compound V victims. I could have if I'd killed Edgar immediately, Clark said, if I'd imposed control instead of trusting the process. And then you'd be ruling this world too, Annie said, just like your Earth. Is that better? Clark didn't answer. Annie had become the face of post-Vought heroism, one of the few soups who'd fought the system from inside, who'd maintained genuine heroism despite corporate corruption. She'd started a foundation supporting Compound V victims, advocating for soup rehabilitation, and training enhanced individuals to use their powers responsibly. I'm leaving soon, Clark said quietly. Annie's head snapped toward him. What? Why? You've done so much good here. People are finally starting to trust heroes again. The systems you helped build are functional without me, Clark interrupted. That was the goal. Create structures that work without requiring a godlike guardian. You, the boys, Mallory's network, the new oversight committees. You can handle this world's protection now. But where will you go? Clark looked up at the stars. Home, back to my Earth, to face what I built there. The regime still exists in my absence. People are still suffering under authoritarian control I established. I ran away from that responsibility when the dimensional spell pulled me here. Time to go back and try to fix it. What if you can't? Annie asked. What if your Earth is too far gone? Then I'll spend however long it takes trying, Clark said. Same as I did here, refusing to become the tyrant while fighting the tyranny, trusting people to build better systems, even when it seems impossible. Annie was quiet for a moment, then, thank you for showing us that heroes could exist, for not giving up on humanity even when we didn't deserve it. You always deserved it, Clark said. Vought convinced you otherwise, but you were always worth fighting for. He rose into the air, cape billowing in the evening wind. One more thing, Annie called up. How do you get back to your Earth? The spell that brought you here sealed behind you. Clark smiled, the first genuine smile in months. I've been listening to dimensional frequencies for weeks, learning the pattern. Kryptonian hearing can detect things beyond normal physics. I'll find my way home. And if you can't, then I'll stay and keep fighting here, Clark said. Either way, I'm where I'm needed. He accelerated into the sky, breaking the sound barrier, climbing toward the edge of atmosphere where dimensional barriers were thinnest. Below, New York sprawled, no longer Vault's city, but humanity's. Still imperfect, still struggling, but trying, growing, building something better than what had been. Clark closed his eyes and listened. Dimensional harmonics, reality vibrations, the subtle frequencies that separated parallel Earths. He'd been hearing them since he arrived, the echo of his home universe calling to him across the multiverse. Now he followed that call. Reality rippled, space folded. The barriers between worlds thinned in response to Kryptonian biology resonating with dimensional frequencies. Clark felt the pull, home, the regime, Lois's grave, Batman's insurgency, everything he'd run from when the spell had pulled him here. He could go back, fix what he'd broken, maybe even find redemption. Or he could stay, keep fighting, keep being the hero this world had needed. The choice was his. Clark thought of Lois, of the Joker's neck snapping, of Bruce Wayne's back breaking under regime hands, of Diana's disappointment, of Flash's desperation, of every choice that had led him from Earth's greatest hero to its absolute ruler. Then he thought of Annie's foundation, of the boys' network, of reformed soups trying to be better, of a world that had learned heroism was possible again. Both worlds needed him. Both deserved better than what they had, but only one needed him to face his mistakes instead of running from them. Superman opened his eyes, made his choice, and dove into the dimensional rift. Reality screamed around him, colors that didn't exist, sounds outside comprehension, the sensation of existence unraveling and reforming simultaneously. He pushed through, following the harmonic signature of his home Earth, reaching for the universe where he'd been both savior and destroyer. The rift sealed behind him, and in the sky above the boys' universe, the sun set on a world that Superman had saved not through power, but through principle, not through control, but through trust, not by becoming the hero they deserved, but by showing them they could become heroes themselves. 3 years later, in the boys' universe, a child was born with powers. Natural powers, not compound by enhancement, but genuine meta-human ability manifesting spontaneously for the first time in recorded history. Annie January was there when the parents brought their daughter to the Hero Rehabilitation Center, terrified of what their child might become. She held the girl gently, felt the heat vision beginning to manifest, and smiled. It's okay, she told the parents. We'll teach her, show her how to use her gifts, help her understand that power is a responsibility, not a right. The parents looked skeptical. 3 years hadn't erased decades of conditioning that enhanced individuals were dangerous, that powers corrupted, that only corporate control had prevented catastrophe. How do you know she won't become like Homelander? The father asked. How do you know power won't corrupt her? Annie thought of Superman, of his refusal to become the tyrant despite every temptation, of his choice to trust humanity instead of ruling it, of his departure to face his own mistakes rather than staying where he was worshipped. Because we'll teach her what someone taught us, Annie said, that heroes aren't born or made, they're chosen, every day, every decision. Every moment they choose principle over power. She looked down at the child, whose eyes were already beginning to glow with nascent heat vision. And because hope shines brightest in the darkest night, In another universe, another dimension, Superman landed on the steps of the regime's headquarters. Batman's insurgency was waiting, weapons drawn, defenses activated, prepared for the tyrant's return. Clark raised his hands, cape settling around his shoulders. "I'm here to surrender," he said quietly, "to face justice for what I've done, to help dismantle the regime and rebuild something better. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm asking for the chance to try." Bruce Wayne stood at the front of the insurgency, cowl hiding his expression, but voice revealing everything. What changed? Clark thought of the boy's universe, of choosing trust over control, of watching humans build heroism without requiring a godlike guardian, of learning that the hardest part of being a hero was accepting you couldn't save everyone, but trying anyway. "I met a world that needed saving," he said, "and I saved it without becoming its tyrant. I'd like to try doing the same here." Batman was silent for a long moment. Then he lowered his weapon. "It won't be easy. The regime has roots everywhere. Dismantling it will take years, decades, and people will still suffer while we work." "I know," Clark said, "but suffering under my control isn't better than suffering while building freedom. I learned that the hard way." Diana stepped forward, golden lasso in hand. "Prove it. Let me use the lasso of truth. Show us you've actually changed." Clark nodded and held out his wrists. The lasso wrapped around him, golden light blazing, compelling absolute truth. "Do you still believe the regime was necessary?" Diana asked. "No," Clark said, the word pulled from him by Hestia's fire. "I was wrong, terrified and grieving and convinced that control would prevent more tragedy. But I just created different tragedy, worse tragedy. I became what I was fighting." "Will you try to rebuild the regime if we give you freedom?" Bruce asked. "No," Clark said again, tears beginning to stream. "I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to fix what I broke, helping people build systems that don't require me, earning redemption I don't deserve." The lasso flared brighter, confirming truth. Diana removed it slowly. "He's genuine. He's actually changed." "Changed," Bruce said. "But can we trust that change won't revert under pressure?" "No," Clark admitted. "You can't trust that. I can't even trust that. All I can promise is that I'll try. Every day, every choice, every moment I'm tempted to take control again, I'll choose differently. And if I fail, if I start becoming the tyrant again, you have my permission to stop me, permanently if necessary." Barry Allen stepped forward. The Flash, the heart of the insurgency, the hero who'd never stopped believing redemption was possible even for the worst among them. "I believe him," Barry said quietly. "He sounds like someone I used to know. Someone who would have done anything to save people. Someone who was the best of us before grief broke him." "Grief doesn't excuse tyranny," Bruce said flatly. "No," Barry agreed. "But maybe understanding grief helps prevent the next tyranny. We can execute him for his crimes, or we can use his experience to make sure nobody else walks his path. I vote we try the second option." The insurgency began debating, arguing, dividing along familiar lines. Those who wanted justice through execution, those who believed in redemption's possibility, those who simply wanted the war to end, regardless of method. Clark stood in the center of it all, listening to people decide his fate, and felt something he hadn't felt since Lois died. Hope. Not that he'd be forgiven, he wouldn't be, didn't deserve to be, but that maybe possibly he could spend however much time he had left making amends. Building instead of destroying, trusting instead of controlling, being the hero instead of the tyrant. The SS shield on his chest gleamed in starlight, symbol of a hope he'd lost and was desperately trying to rebuild. Above him, in the sky of his broken earth, the sun was setting, and somewhere across the multiverse, in a world he'd helped save, a child with heat vision was learning that power didn't have to corrupt, that heroes were possible, that hope could survive even the darkest night.